Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let's try that again, please. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ayabulela Poro. I am the Manager for Communications and Stakeholder Relations at the MDDA, and I'm also going to be your Program Director for today's proceedings. This is the part where you give me a round of applause. So just a few announcements that I wanted to make. If you're looking for the Wi-Fi password, the password name is capital, right? And then the password for it is connect me with a capital letter C. Okay? Bathrooms are out this way, and of course we have coffee and refreshments on my left-hand side. So please make sure that you're able to enjoy those too. And of course, it's not just us in the room today. We also have our audiences who are joining us online. So would like to welcome them too. We do have a very packed program, and I think a very interesting one as well, including panel discussions that we're going to be having today. But of course, the main reason that we are here is for the statement of commitment. This wasn't the official opening and welcome. We're going to get that from our Executive Director, Executive Manager, look at me giving him a promotion. It's our Executive Manager for Projects at the MDDA, Mr. Mzuvu Gilekashe. I'm going to call him up for him to give the opening and welcome remarks. So please give him a round of applause.
Thank you very much, Program Director. I think people it looks very calm here today. It's as if people are not even interacting with each other. I'm worried of the mood. I'm not feeling the mood. Perhaps it's Monday morning. Let's accept it as it is. It's Monday, but let me start by greeting Program Director, distinguished guests from government, media, academia, people, civil society, partners from GIZ, members of press, colleagues that are here, staff from MDDA. Good morning, colleagues.
Good morning.
Good morning. Hey, good morning. It's very cold. Program Director, did people here have coffee? Okay. Yeah, sometimes coffee does the trick. I think today we are gathered here. I think it's a defining moment, having this launch of GIZ. I think as MDDA, we are deeply honored to host this launch and signing of the statement of commitment and call to action on safeguarding journalism against online harms. We're also meeting at the back of the National Press Freedom Day. I think today it reminds us that media freedom is not a privilege granted to journalists, it is a constitutional right. I think as we gathered here today, colleagues, there are a lot of reflections that we need to do as individuals and where our country comes from. And I think we really feel privileged that we are able to sit today amongst this other and really exercise this freedom that we have in our country. Just in terms of the research highlights, the research that led to this statement of commitment lays bare the scale and urgency of the crisis conducted through the partnership between MDDA and GIZ and validated through a series of national consultations. The study found that over 40% of journalists surveyed have experienced online harassment. Alarmingly, nearly half reported sustained campaigns of abuse rather than isolated incidents. These are not random acts of hostility. They are targeted, coordinated attacks that aim to silence voices, intimidate truth seekers, and discourage critical, reporting. And this research highlights female and LGBTQI and journalists bear the brunt of this violence, subjected not only to threats of physical harm, but also to sexual harassment, stalking, hacking, and defamation. Now today, we have platforms like WhatsApp and Facebook have emerged as key sites of abuse. I'm sure we've all experienced that in our individual capacity. Often private, encrypted spaces where perpetrators operate with impunity, shielded from accountability. These attacks are deeply personal, often and homophobic in nature, and they have one ultimate goal to push journalists out of public space, to erase their voices from our digital discourse, and to undermine the integrity of our democracy. So the MDDA's then mandate and signing of the statement of commitment. The MDDA's mandate is to promote, I think all of you would know, media development and diversity. It's rooted in the constitutional principle that a free, pluralistic, and independent media is essential to democracy. But freedom of press cannot exist without safety of press. The right to speak truth to power must be matched by the right to do so without fear, whether offline or online. I think this is why today the signing of statement of commitment is not merely ceremonial. It represents a shared pledge to act, to translate research into policy principles and practice, and solidarity in system of accountability. This statement also calls for collaboration across all spheres, from government and regulators to technology companies, media houses, and civil society. It challenges each of us to take concrete steps to protect journalists from online harms and to create a culture of respect, dignity, and digital safety. It also acknowledges that online violence is not just a digital problem, it is a real-world consequences. Journalists self-censor, withdraw from social media, or leave the profession altogether. The result is a loss not only to individuals but to communities, particularly those who depend on community and small commercial media and representing access to information. So, ladies and gentlemen, our collaboration with GIZ has been invaluable not only for technical support and research expertise it has provided, but also for the shared commitment to advancing democratic media statement and inclusive and sustainable. We extend our deepest appreciation to GIZ for walking the journey with us and for believing that South Africa's democracy is stronger when its media is protected. So I think that was just a preamble. That's the opening and welcoming. Thank you to those that helped me to write that. You get these people write for you and you have to read. I think when we come to the issues of just welcoming, and we do want to welcome everyone to this session for today. We really hope that it becomes a session that is obviously engaging. I think there will be a panelist where people will be given an opportunity to really reflect, ask questions, I think enrich in terms of our literature as well, because I think this is a platform in which we learn, not only us, but for people that are watching and would obviously come and learn from what is going to be happening today. So hence we call it defining moment. Each moment, the session we have with different partners is always a learning path for us, because it does what it does, it enriches us in terms of various perspectives, various views, and various engagements. And I think let this be a learning platform for all of us today here. So on behalf of MDDA, I think every partner, research and journalist who contributed to this work, your voices, your experience, and your courage have shaped this initiative and given its purpose. So I think with those few words, I do want to welcome you. In my language, we normally say when you welcome people, you even allow them to take off their jackets and hang them. So those who have taken the jackets before I've done this welcome, it means they were out of order. They're supposed to wait for me to first warmly welcome you so that now you are free to take off your jacket and you can hang them now and feel. Don't take off your shoes though, but only your jackets. Feel at home, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kashe. I think we can give him another round of applause, please. There are quite a few important things that I think he mentioned in that speech. Including, I think, the power of collaboration. So really being able to find partners who are able to share, I think, the vision that we had with the study, and essentially trying to build awareness around this issue that we are dealing with today. And I think on that note as well, we are really commemorating, I think, important moments in our country at the moment. This includes National Freedom Day, or otherwise known as Black Wednesday, which was commemorated yesterday. Of course, the history behind this is also censorship that was imposed by the apartheid government against journalists in the country who are not able to fulfill their job. But today we're talking about a different censorship. It's a self-censorship that's imposed by the scourge that we're discussing today. And really what we're trying to do, I think, is really find those people who are able to join hands with organizations like the MDDA to make sure that we come together and that we're able to combat these challenges. It is, of course, also National Pride Month in South Africa. For all of those who don't know or those who are allies, I'm obviously a part of that community, so I would know what that is all about. But also this study did focus on LGBTQ journalists and the impact that this scourge had on their lives, but also their ability to fulfill their jobs. On that note, the partner, of course, who came on board for this was the GIZ, and I'm going to ask Ms. Zanele Zwane, the technical advisor at GIZ, to just give a message around strengthening public-private cooperation through partnerships for prevention as far as it goes with this program. So can we please welcome Zanele Zwane to the stage, please.
Morning, everyone. As I've been introduced, I am Zanele Zwane, representing GIZ, the program called the Partnership for Prevention of Gender-Based Violence in Southern Africa. We are a project that operates in 5 SADC countries, including South Africa, Lesotho, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Malawi, and have a presence in SADC, in Botswana. That said, as the name suggests, we are a GBV primary prevention program, and I will elaborate basically to explain how GBV, media, protections, and all that, how it comes about. But before I say that, maybe just to welcome everyone, a warm welcome, and thank you for joining us on this important launch of the Statement of Commitment, calling for safer digital spaces for journalists. GBV has been a serious social problem in South Africa for many years now, and it's reported to have one of the highest ranking global prevalences of GBV. According to the recent launch of the first ever South African National Gender-Based Violence Prevalence Study, about 35.5% of women in South Africa reported having experienced physical and/or sexual violence during their lifetime. So this demonstrates just the magnitude of the problem. Underpinning government's commitment to addressing GBV in the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide of 2020 to 2030 to drive coordination on multi-sectorial national response on GBV through a 6-pillar approach. Pillar 2 of this national strategic plan is responsible for GBV prevention efforts. And central to this pillar is the endeavors to prevent GBV, is the understanding of harmful social norms, attitudes, and behavior as one of the key drivers of GBV. Thus, the need for accelerated primary prevention. And since 2017, GIZ, through the Partnership for Prevention Program, anchored in a whole of society approach to address GBV on a broad scale. PFP we collaborate with regional, national, and sub-regional stakeholders from government, non-governmental, and the private sector to implement multi-sectorial evidence-informed GBV primary prevention flagships in Southern African communities. PFPs also supports capacity strengthening of these stakeholders for the effective and coordinated implementation of these measures, fostering regional exchange and research around lessons learned and best practices. In South Africa, this includes working with the media to bring about change and alter social norms and practices that perpetuate gender-based violence. Mainstream media has the potential to facilitate a social shift from just being aware of GBV and making strides towards accountability in various spheres of life, including our personal lives and relationships as society and the justice system. As we know, GBV happens within a home setting, it happens outside, but most of the time what we are finding is that it happens at home among people who are supposed to love each other, among people who are supposed to protect each other, among people who are supposed to be there for each other. And when research shows that at the core of these is the way we are socialized, it's the norms that we carry that are embedded in us. It's the norms that we pick up from outside, the bro codes that we have, or the way we expect our women to carry themselves. And if people do not conform to these norms that we have designed and expect them to live according to, then it becomes a challenge. Then that may result in gender-based violence. So journalists become very key in helping us as a society shape and define those norms, because as we know, culture evolves, right? Norms evolve, they come and they go. Some of them are trends that come for a short phase, some of them are long-term, but they're not unchangeable, basically. We are all changeable. So this is where the role of the media comes in. So to support this critical media function, we as PFP collaborate with key media stakeholders to implement flagships that aim to achieve behavior change within the media and creative industries, to create more gender-sensitive, non-stereotyping, equal and positive change-driven content, as well as create a safe and equal production environment behind the scenes. In 2018 to 2012, PFP and its partners successfully implemented what we called Step It Up 1. This was a program of basically a series of programs that were designed to enhance the capacity of news and entertainment media practitioners to produce content that is gender sensitive and does not stereotype and re-victimize survivors or victims of GBV. This resulted in the development of the Step It Up Media Sensitivity Reporting Training Manual, as well as a research that was done by our partner at that time, it was Gender Links, which actually looked at, it was more of a media monitoring study to look at the trends, to what extent GBV is reported in different media. I think we looked at extensively print, radio, and a bit of TV. But what also came out of the study was that as much as the media have a role to play and need to play this role towards on influencing change at a social level and influencing the way people perceive and respond to gender-based violence, it also found out that there was also a bit an element of GBV that was also meted towards journalists. So basically, but we did proceed we implemented the Step It Up Media institutions also committed to, at that time, they also committed to a call to action to report on GBV and cover GBV in a sensitive, non-stereotyping manner and create safe spaces and equal working spaces for media practitioners. Building on this success, Step It Up recommended and recommendations for Step It Up in the current phase, which is present. PFP is working within the media to help the media that seeks to create a sustainable media capacity in gender sensitivity reporting and mobilizing technical resources for journalists to accurately report on GBV, on the NSP, and on GBV, while also promoting journalist safety against cyberbullying to ensure their protection from harassment aimed at gagging their freedom of speech. As I've indicated, when we did our research, we found that media is also a victim of them. Journalists are also victims of GBV, especially online GBV. So responding to this, Step It Up one strongly recommended interventions to address these challenges. Thus, the partnership with MDDA to advocate for strengthened protection of female journalists against online GBV. However, as much as we are doing this, and today we come to launch our commitment to protecting our journalists against online GBV, sustainable and effective and sensitive media reporting on GBV also requires advocacy for freedom of speech and protection of journalists in carrying out their work. This cannot only be done by GIZ and the key partners in the media fraternity. We also need key stakeholders. We need media houses. We need the big tech to also take an active involvement in safeguarding women online. As GIZ, we are excited to be here with all of you in making this call to action a reality. We hope that this is a start of a journey where we all ensure that journalists can do their work safely and without fear or favor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Swane. Again, powerful words. And I really think just highlighting how important I think it was to have GIZ on this project, to be able to raise awareness around this issue, but to really be able to conduct the research as well. Some key things that you touched on there, which I think are quite important, really again highlighting, I think how what really underpins what we're trying to correct here is to be able to make sure that journalists are able to do their jobs and to advance freedom of expression. At the core of this statement of commitment, of course, is the research itself, and there's a highly dedicated team at the MDDA who were behind this research, and they're going to present on it now at the moment. And I'm going to ask the research lead at the MDDA, Ms. Mishka Lewis, to please come to the front to then present some of the findings, to give us a picture of really how deep this issue goes before then we go on to unpack the statement of commitment. So I'm asking Mishka to please come to the front. Ladies and gentlemen, please give her a round of applause.
We just need a few minutes for the presentation. Okay, while we wait, and before we proceed to the research presentation, I'd just like to acknowledge a few of the key stakeholders that are in the room today. This includes GIZ, as you just heard, GCIS, as well as the Film Publications Board, is that OS Lab, the HSRC, Big Tech is also here today, which includes TikTok, civil society members, as well as research institutions or academia, sector bodies, which involve SACRO and NCRF, which is for community media, as well as our guests online today, locally, internationally, and continentally as well, including our media practitioners and executives in the room today. I think while we wait a few minutes for the presentation, my name is Mishka Lewis, and I am a researcher at MDDA. And I also want to acknowledge fellow researchers, Patu, as well as Kamani, who were assisting me diligently in this project. And I want to also thank you for being here today for this groundbreaking study that has been made possible through the partnership with GIZ and MDDA. I was so nervous coming up here, and now that anxiety just got worse. But I think I'm going to just get into it. And I think that the critical importance of being here today and safeguarding women journalists is on a topic of technologically facilitated gender-based violence, or otherwise known as online gender-based violence against women journalists, which I would state is not merely a professional hazard, and that we should change our perspective to think of it as an immediate threat to our democracy, our media diversity, as well as our societal well-being. And I think importantly, when journalists are silenced through digital violence, we lose a lot, and democracy itself loses as well. So I want to be clear in terms of what is at stake and why this matters. When journalists are silenced, critical voices are removed from public discourse. Women's perspectives and reporting are systematically suppressed. And I think importantly, this is not something that is abstract. It is something that is happening right now in our newsrooms across South Africa. Online violence creates what is called a chilling effect, a climate of fear that undermines journalism itself. And when journalists are forced into silence, we lose vital information. Great. Okay, why is the... And I think most importantly also, the public's right to know is also compromised. For our research, we particularly grounded it in the South African reality and context. And I think importantly, the numbers are stark. Research that has been done prior by Gender Links in collaboration with MMA as well as UNESCO in 2022. And already the results were stark, and so it just exacerbated from there. Therefore, this issue demands our urgent attention. It has been reported that globally, 73% of women journalists report experiencing online abuse, and that is 73%. Here in South Africa, according to SANEF's 2024 data, 49% of female journalists have faced digital harassment connected to their work. That is nearly half of our journalists who are at risk. But here's what makes this particularly dangerous. These attacks don't just stay online. Technologically facilitated attacks escalate from online harassment to offline intimidation, and sometimes to physical violence. And this is what we call the spillover effect, and also emphasizes that the issue of online violence shouldn't be minimized because it's not physical. Black women, LGBTQIA+ journalists and journalists with disabilities, as well as junior reporters, we have found face amplified and compounded abuse, and this is as a result of intersectional violence. We must be clear-eyed about this. Political and economic power structures weaponize online violence to silence critical journalism. So what we did to understand this throughout the research is our key objectives. And firstly, we looked at assessing the prevalence of and the nature of cyberbullying, cybermisogyny, and harassment experienced by women journalists in South Africa. Secondly, we looked at evaluating existing support systems within media houses and identifying the critical gaps in terms of response as well. And then thirdly, we looked at what are the actionable recommendations to foster institutional commitment and protective measures. Let me share a bit of our research approach. As you can see, this was a comprehensive mixed methods research study with quite a broad stakeholder engagement. We conducted a quantitative survey through chart form, which looked at particularly the prevalence, the impact, and support mechanisms that exist. And these included about 65 participants who completed the survey. There were more, since it was a quite elaborative survey compared to other research surveys. Only 65 completed it. These composed of journalists, editors, managers across commercial and community media. We also looked at more textured narratives through in-depth qualitative interviews with 14 key stakeholders, and these comprised of affected journalists, media professionals, regulators, civil society, as well as sector bodies. And then critically, afterwards, we held validation workshops across 3 provinces. These included KwaZulu-Natal, Gauteng, and Western Cape, which brought about more than 83 participants that composed again of journalists, your media executives, academics, civil society, and anti-gender-based violence activists. And I think the diverse stakeholders that were included or that we heard from in the research was commercial media and newsrooms, community and small commercial media, which is often neglected, as well as regulatory bodies, government institutions, civil society groups, and most critically, our advisory committee members, who we were able to consult with and who guided us, as well as digital safety experts. And then furthermore, we conducted a desktop literature review of research that has been done prior to this phenomenon. And it is also important to note that this was a national assessment within Southern Africa. So we're looking particularly within that scope and regional context, focusing on journalists across all platforms and beats. So it wasn't particular to investigative journalism, as we've quite often heard how the scourge has affected that particular heartbeat, with particular attention to women, queer, and other disadvantaged groups, and amplifying their voices as well. What did we find, and some of the alarming and urgent key findings? In our survey that we conducted, 41% of journalists, predominantly women, have experienced online harassment connected to their professional work. That's more than 2 out of every 5 journalists, right? And here's what I found particularly concerning is that 46% of those who were harassed online experienced it occasionally or very often, indicating that this is not something that is episodic or that is spontaneous. These are sustained campaigns usually. And this persistence aligns with our understanding of cyber misogyny as a systematic exclusion mechanism. It operates often through repetitive, coordinated harassment, designed, of course, to silence women's voices and their participation in public discourse. When we look at the reporting outcomes, the picture is incredibly troubling. I think there was a lot of apathy that needs to be addressed. But among those who did report, the vast majority indicated dissatisfaction with official outcomes. And these were reporting through their media houses and so forth. And I want us to think about, what does that mean, right? Journalists face abuse, they report it, and nothing meaningful happens. So clearly, this is a system failure. Now, where does this violence occur? As we've noted, the violence is pervasive across all platforms, and many suspected Twitter to be number one, but our respondents indicated otherwise. WhatsApp and Facebook emerged as the primary harassment platforms. And I think concerningly WhatsApp, this is particularly insidious because it means it's private, it's direct harassment, it's usually harder to monitor, it's harder to report, and it's harder to escape. But here's the pattern we see repeatedly. Attacks often escalate from online threats to offline intimidation and physical danger, often necessitating measures to protect the physical well-being of the journalist. And they're coordinated across multiple platforms. So it's not just one platform that can be signaled out. Responsibility needs to be taken across various OTT platforms. And of course, as it is across various OTT platforms, this just maximizes the harms. So what triggers these attacks? Some of the heartbeats that we identify that are extraordinarily high risk would be your political reporting and investigative journalism, which is your covering of your political parties, leaders, government actions, as well as exposing financial conduct, state capture, illicit networks, and also there were also other beats that were identified, such as gender and sexuality issues. These are your stories on gender-based violence, LGBTQI+ rights, as well as feminism, your social justice topics, reporting on inequality, racism, which we are particularly familiar with in South Africa, human rights violation, and so importantly, this is not just random trolling. And I want to emphasize this. These are orchestrated disinformation campaigns. We documented coordinated harassment campaigns designed specifically to silence critical journalism. These included state-sponsored or politically aligned actors, mobilizing online mobs, bot networks, and paid trolls to amplify attacks, disinformation narratives deliberately to spread and to discredit journalists' credibility and character. And those of our colleagues in the room know how incredibly important it is for the credibility of a journalist and the integrity of journalism. Established political and economic elites are also using online violence as a weapon. Populist movements are weaponizing gender-based attacks to delegitimize women's journalism. What are the forms of the abuse that take place? These are some of the causes and the patterns. The most common form of harassment that was indicated was threat of physical violence. Again, online violence not being something that is just offline, but being very visceral, right? And this is followed by defamation and smear campaigns to discredit the journalist's work, to destroy their professional reputations. We also documented stalking, sexual harassment. This is what makes it particularly gendered in that women face more sexual harassment compared to their male counterparts, and racist abuse occurring at similar rates. Hence, the lens that we looked through with this violence was intersectional. And also increasingly, we're seeing sophisticated technological tactics, which includes hacking, unauthorized access to accounts, doxing, which is the malicious publication of private information. Therefore, I say this is not just trolling, this is systematic, targeted violence. What about the impact? What about the high stakes? And I think it's devastating, particularly when we were interviewing journalists. It kept me up at night. But the most common impact was depression and anxiety, severe psychological distress affecting daily functioning, post-traumatic stress, which is persistent fear, hypervigilance, trauma symptoms, burnout and social isolation, emotional exhaustion from constant attacks and the lack of support, as well as withdrawal from professional networks. But here's what threatens our democracy most directly: self-censorship and career withdrawal. Journalists are avoiding covering certain topics, certain people, certain organizations, of course, to protect themselves. Women are leaving journalism entirely, and there's reduced productivity because of time and energy being diverted to from reporting to managing, right, the harassment or their mental health. And when journalists self-censor or leave the profession, we all lose. Public accountability suffers, our democracy weakens or dilutes, and I think these are not just the statistics, these are lived experiences, and I want to share some voices, some quotes from the interviews that we conducted. A female radio journalist from Gauteng told us, "When I report on politics and corruption, my inbox floods with insults. It doesn't stop. It's intended to silence me." A print journalist from the Western Cape, "There's no policy in my newsroom to deal with online harassment. It's treated as a personal issue." An online journalist from KZN, "Even when you report the abuse, the platforms just send automated replies, nothing happens." One interview respondent shared, "Even my male colleagues have said this to me. They noted that the level of abuse that they receive versus what I receive is quite different. Sexual violence is a prominent feature of it." Another journalist told us, "One chick said to me, 'No wonder you're disabled because you're lesbian.'" And yeah, and there are stories I avoid now. The risk is too high. I've stopped reporting on certain issues because I can't handle the threats. These are the lived experiences and the voices of South African journalists today. And we might ask ourselves, why does this continue? It's not a new issue. So why does it continue? And we've identified institutional and regulatory gaps that need to be addressed to curb this issue. Within media organizations, only 7% of our respondents indicated that their media houses have specific policies addressing online harassment. And we can further, in our panel discussions, kind of flesh that out a bit more as to why that is. But I think most importantly, inadequate policies for the online or digital space, limited psychological support. It was only big media that could afford mental health services to journalists that were affected directly. Then also insufficient training on digital safety was another indicator, as well as resource constraints, which was very particular for our community media, which is particularly vulnerable. Then within our legal systems, the laws exist, right? But they are really applied to protect journalists, or the implementation thereof is a bit sketchy. Legal recourse was also said to be costly, time-consuming, and often ineffective, according to journalists. And then response times are slow, and by the time the cases are heard, the damage has already been done. Then most importantly, there's fear of retaliation, because the profession or the norm in the profession is you have to have tough skin, or you have to have hair on your teeth, and this is just part and parcel of the job. There's a fear of retaliation. Journalists are reluctant to report because they worry attacks will escalate. And then technology platforms, I think this is something that is important for us to address. Ineffective content moderation that doesn't recognize coordinated harassment. Some indicated slow or non-existent responses to abuse reports, and automated systems that sometimes remove journalist content while allowing the harassment to proliferate. And these are accountability issues at every level that needs to be addressed. So what must we do? We have clear evidence-based recommendations. This is not the first research to be conducted or the first assessment. So what is to be done? First and most importantly, as has been echoed by previous speaker, collaboration is of essence here, and we need collaborative action to address this scourge. Our research looked at 6 critical intervention areas that requires us all, every stakeholder in this room, to act. First being preventative online harassment response mechanisms. We need systems in place before the attacks happen. Second, gender-sensitive safety policies in every media organization. Third, mandatory digital safety training and psychological support for all journalists. Fourth, capacity building across the sector. Fifth, strengthened cross-sectorial collaboration, because we cannot solve this issue in silos, right, as has been echoed. Sixth, strengthened legal frameworks with real enforcement. And seventh, leveraging technology for protections. So how can we use the same tools that is used to abuse journalism? How can we use those tools that are used for harm to safeguard journalists? And most importantly, we're not alone in this work. There are resources that exist, even though more needs to be done. Nationally, we have SANAF and SADC offering free 24-hour support. We also included Media Monitoring Africa and the Center for Applied Legal Studies. Internationally, we have guidelines, UNESCO Safety for Journalists program. We have digital safety tools that are also available through Thomson Reuters Foundation. These resources exist. We need to ensure that journalists know about them and can access them easily. This brings us to our call for action, a call for collaborative action through the Statement of Commitment, which we are launching here today. A zero tolerance pledge against online gender-based violence. And this is about proactive protection of our media diversity and democracy, and requires every stakeholder in the room to act. Then before I close, I've already expressed a deep gratitude to our stakeholders, and then to creating a safe online space. In conclusion, the systematic targeting of women journalists through online violence is an assault on the foundations of our South African democracy. When women's voices are silenced in newsrooms and digital spaces, society loses the diversity of thought essential for a healthy democratic discourse. The evidence before you is clear, the call to action is clear, and I think most importantly, our time to act is now. Thank you.
Our time is certainly now. Please give another round of applause to the research lead. While we prepare for the next session, I'm just going to ask my colleagues to please help out with the chairs for our panel discussion. But thank you again, Mishka, for painting what I think is really a scary and quite a gloomy image of what is happening. And the insights I think that you had received from the research, I think, again, it is quite frightening because, as you were saying, we're talking about orchestrated disinformation campaigns. And I think with the patterns that we're facing in our newsrooms across the country, with shrinking resources, this is really something that needs to be considered and one that needs an immediate response. Further to that, we're talking about also growing patterns in how people are consuming information and news on digital platforms. So if they are then going to digital platforms to receive that information, and especially in light of, I think, quite key periods in our country, such as the elections that are coming up next year, how is it that then we are protecting our journalists to make sure that as they are reporting and as people go online to receive their news, this is done in a way that is also safe for the people who are reporting the news. And especially, again, I think for those spillover effects that Mishka was talking about, and again, the beats that the journalists are focusing on, knowing that political reporting is one of the most high-risk areas for reporting for journalists, where we see some of these ramifications of online abuse. It is quite worrying and therefore does need, I think, an urgent response. But again, I think to unpack this and to really talk to journalists online, I am going to invite our next session, which is going to be our panel discussion that is going to be moderated by the head of legal and risk at the Media Development and Diversity Agency, that is Mr. David Morerwa. He is then going to bring up and introduce all the speakers who are going to be part of the panel. Please give a round of applause for David Morerwa.
Morning, everybody. I think over time we can pick up that the applause is now improving. And morning to everybody online. I think prior to inviting everybody on, I think Miska closed with a somewhat provoking line. The evidence is clear, the time to act is now. We've participated in this program since its initiation months ago, and the research is quite shocking. So I've been given the chance to come and moderate a discussion with a team of journalists that will be sharing reflections from the study and their lived experiences. But prior to that, before calling them on, in our pre-panel chat, I shared with two of the members that I formed a moderation of a panel a few days ago, but about bullying in schools. And what caught me there was some corporate psychologist. I don't know why they called a corporate psychologist to a bullying discussion at schools. But throughout her discussion, I could pick up that there is a correlation between bullying and what ultimately happens in corporate environment. And I think she said over time, she could pick up that kids that are bullied from a young age, you are able to pick them up even when you go to corporate. You're able to pick up in the corporate environment who's the bully, who has been bullied, and who are the bystanders. And I think to me, when I prepared for this session to come and moderate today, I asked myself, and which is something we also need to do to those of us in the room and those of us online, what we need to ask ourselves is, with the findings that have just been shared today, which role or which part are we playing? I'm sure all of us here have got a Twitter account. We've got WhatsApp, we've got Facebook. Are we bystanders? Are we watching as this violence is happening? Or are we forming part of the bullies? Or in this instance, are we victimizers? Or are we victims ourselves? So that really, for me, caught me. But today, you're not here to listen to me. I've been given the privilege to call upon Ms. Qaanitah Hunter, who's a political journalist, editor, and is the best-selling author of 3 books, And she has a new book that is coming up, and it's going to be launched now in October, titled, Why Am I Like This? So with that, I'm sure we'll probably be invited to the launch. But if you're a bystander, why are you like that? If you're a victimizer, why are you like that? But we must not ask ourselves, or rather we must not ask the victim, why are you like that? Because it's us who are the bullies, or the victimizers, or the bystanders that are indirectly or directly, if you look at it similarly, contributing to this violence. Secondly, I have also the privilege of calling Ms. Marcia Moyana, who's an award-winning freelance journalist, specializes in health, science, and environmental journalism, has worked for a number of organizations, the Health E-News, the Mail and Guardian, ENCA, Opeka Investigations, Environmental Journalism, Newsday, Lesotho, and others. Lastly, would be joined by Jillian Green, who's the editor-in-chief at Daily Maverick, who has also established the Southern African largest climate crisis journalism unit. She has also assisted in solidifying Daily Maverick as a leading and environmental reporting institution. So as we see, I'm going to be the only thorn on stage. So as you're going to be giving me a round of applause, can I please also ask that you give my colleagues a round of applause as well? So we are now here, and I also want to make sure that the camera has me well captured. Because in the preparation for this session, I said to a few of my friends, you guys have not seen anybody on YouTube that looks like me. So you've got an opportunity today. Thanks, Mr. Deutsche. You've got an opportunity today to see me. But what has worried me is the stats shared. We celebrate, are we now on the 31st year of our democracy? And those that have read on how the Media Development and Diversity was established, or how this democracy that we enjoy has been achieved, you can pick up two things. That amongst the list that I'm sure you guys would mention is our democracy was achieved through dissent, firstly. Secondly, an overzealous, non-fearing media environment. Today, the Daily Maverick posted on its media pages about the internal auditor at the Ekurhuleni municipality. I think it's Mpho Mafole, who blew the whistle on corruption. I think 3 days after submitting this report, the gentleman was assassinated. So to me, this violence that we're seeing is not very far from what we're seeing that is currently happening to whistleblowers and everything else. But you see how we are now up in arms, speaking left, right, and center about these issues. Just because, or rather, let me put it differently. We only start speaking when something happens to somebody. And when we're called to do something, we don't do it. I once attended a panel of this nature, and one of the panelists said, when they came for the Jews, I kept quiet. They came for the Nazis, I kept quiet. But when they came for me, nobody was there to speak on my behalf. What different partners in this session called upon to answer to a call that is beyond just individuals. So I think let's give a chance to my colleagues to share what their views are. We've heard the research, the stats. Colleagues, you are on the ground. What are your lived experiences? I think we'll start with you, Qaanitah, and then we'll come to this side.
Thank you very much. So those figures that were up on stage is our lived reality, and it's something as journalists, you see it, you live it, you experience it, and the consequences that are spoken about, that's often not really brought to life, is many of us decide to just leave the newsroom because of cyber misogyny, because of the online harassment, because of gendered attacks. There's a colleague of ours, Bongekile Makupe, who did a paper at Oxford about what it is like to be a woman and to be a black woman in a South African newsroom. Now, these reports, these research reports, these occasions like today, have to happen. We can take two approaches. We can bemoan a reality that we all know is terrible, or we could try to understand what the real consequences are and what can be done differently. So I left the newsroom a year ago, or more than a year ago now, and could not ever see myself being a journalist as a result of burnout. You get to a point where there's only so much you can be accused. There's only so much that a story about Gaddafi millions can be picked up and bot generated and put up on Twitter. Every time I say something or opine on something, I can only be body shamed to such a degree. I can only have threats against, at some point you have to say, this is madness, And I did what few people had the luxury to do, is to go and retreat, go and get stronger, and come back with a different fight. Now, this media environment that you talk about is a media environment not what you think it is at the moment. It is smaller, it is less resourced, and for the most part, mainstream media, because of the dwindling audiences, we essentially artisan journalists. The mainstream sits in misinformation and disinformation. The mainstream sits on the TikTok platforms and on the podcasts that have no issues, no regulation at all, right? So they're just painting that picture. Now, the consequences of allowing an environment like this, when 15 years ago I would go to my editor and say, my picture has been photoshopped on pornography, what do I do? Ignore them. Ignore them. When you go to a line manager and you say, like the comments on my story are just absolutely brutal, and say, don't read them. Those are lazy responses, right? Funny enough, on the other side, I am now an editor in charge of others, and now I give the same bad advice. Because what do you do, right? But I think it's located in three things. One, there's no consequences. It's easy. It's targeted. I can target Polly van Wyk enough until she leaves journalism. I can see that happening. I can do the same for Qaanitah. I don't need to. That story was written by Caiaphas and Qaanitah in 20 years ago, however long it was ago. But I don't need to target Caiaphas. I can target Qaanitah. Karen Moon. There's 8 journalists covering a Zuma trial. 5 of them are men. I just need to go to the weakest. I just need to hit Karen Moon. If I hit her, the chilling effect is with everyone else. Right? And so we're living the consequences of what that has done. So media houses not taking up the fight in the name of female journalists, 1. 2, that there isn't a special recognition that cyber misogyny is a real thing and has to be targeted as such using the tech platforms. And then the third part of it is a media sustainability part of it, because often we send young female reporters out to the field with little to no training. They're not paid well enough compared to their male colleagues, and the burden of delivery is so much higher, right? So essentially, you're setting up people to fail. You're sending them to the lion's den. And so South Africa is incredible in that our newsrooms have strong females at the helm. Our glass ceilings report show an amazing picture. More than 60% of journalists in newsrooms are female. Middle managers, female. We have a very, very, very good, robust, and it's not incidental. It took deliberate effort, and we are bearing the fruit of it. The Newsroom Eiley Debrief Network has one man out of a sea of 7 other women, right? But essentially, you still have a problem where editors-in-chief, besides Jillian, most of them are men. Where decision makers about resources are men. When it comes to pay parity, the highest earners are men. And so you have this weird concocted thing where women carry more of the load, get paid less, and have to deal with the added burden of online harassment. Why do it? I get why women are exiting, and now what's making me even fearful is that before your time span was 10 years, and then you can't anymore. It's getting shorter and shorter and shorter. Thank you.
Wow. That has to be something else. I mean, you just simply said you left the newsroom a year ago. And you just closed with, why do it? If I was a journalism student sitting here, having idolized you for years, having read your articles, and I'm hearing you say, why do it? And I'm probably in my 3rd year or probably final year, I'll be asking myself, did I maybe make a mistake by choosing this career choice? It would be like that. And what you're saying is some of the stuff that we've really picked up in the research. Marcia, yeah.
I just have like 30 seconds to say that the examples that I picked out, myself, Karen, Paulie, these journalists who get featured in these, like as targeted, women who often get targeted, we are the most supported of all of us. Yeah. We have the privilege of being called to forums like this. We have the privilege of having worked for well-resourced newsrooms, right? Mm. What about if you're a female journalist who works for like Tembisa FM or whatever it may be, where you don't have that backing? Yeah. And that's why the chilling factor for me is the biggest part, is that they come for me so that the reporter from the community radio station doesn't dare.
Yeah.
And just to add on what Qaanitah just said, I mean, when you were reading, when the responses from some of the journalists were read, it was a very triggering moment for me, because you realize that not only are you not the only one who's experiencing this, but for some people it's even worse. And when you're speaking about community-based journalists, for instance, these are people who report on issues that happen in their communities, which means the vulnerability is even greater, because some of your local councillors are your neighbors.
Yeah.
They know which primary school you went to. They even know your routine.
Yeah.
That this time she's out. If she's not reporting maybe on something that is happening in Tembisa Hospital, she's more likely to be in this community in Ivory Park or wherever. And like she said, the likes of Karen Mon and herself are in newsrooms that are well resourced, where we can even see the legal teams taking on some of these issues on their behalf so that the abuse does not continue. But it's not the same for community-based journalists and for people like myself who are freelancers. I mean, I can, Jillian might be my editor, and I sometimes send stories to her, but when something happens to me that is not even aligned with whatever work I'm doing, maybe for Daily Maverick, for instance, who do I then go to? Because I'm just floating. I don't belong to any newsroom. I can't align myself with any newsroom. And that is where the danger is as well. And another issue, I mean, South Africa is a very violent country, and the violence is gendered. And we are the people who report on some of these stats where you are reporting on gender-based violence and what women are experiencing. But sometimes you find yourself being violated even when you are doing that report. There's another journalist colleague of mine who was sexually assaulted while she was doing her job, reporting on a case of violence against women. And I think you become despondent. Like exiting seems like the only solution. But then again, if you are someone who is passionate about issues that are happening in a community, how do you then ignore that? I report on social justice issues sometimes, and if you are seeing migrant women who are pregnant being denied access to health care, when you know that despite their documentation status, South Africa is signatory to all of these international laws where they said we guarantee access to health for all. And nothing is being done about it. And I think even as the media, we sometimes need to take accountability for our role in perpetuating some of this. Because if we already know that a particular individual is spreading harmful narratives and rhetoric and misinformation, why do we continue platforming them? And that is why even in how news reports are framed, sometimes you can realize that the headline is not aligned with the story. And because there's issues of paywall where you can only access the entire story if you are subscribed to a particular publication, people read headlines and run with that. And what that means is they see the headline, look at the journalist's name, and start digging information about the journalist. Now it's no longer the story, but it's what the journalist said, because they did not get access to the full report where maybe the headline was sensational, but the information in the news article is factual and it's something that is happening on the ground. And I think for me, that's another issue which I think as media practitioners, we need to sit back and also look at our role in adding fuel to this fire that none of us have control over. And she's also right, when you meet young journalists, I mean, someone will be telling you that they're an intern at a particular media house, but you know what, when this internship finishes, I'm leaving the media. This is not for me.
Yeah.
That means in 5 years or so, we'll not be having quality reporting. We will just be having, I mean, it's already happening now where anyone opens a media platform and they use social media as a platform to spread the news. And you can see that whoever wrote this has never even written a proper news article. And people are only getting access to that.
Yeah.
You come in as a journalist from a mainstream news publication, and already people are questioning your credibility because, one, you were not the first one to report on the story, but also there's mistrust on media houses. And I mean, questioning the kind of reporting is not an issue. I think the biggest issue is the violence that follows. Because if you are not just going to question my work, but you're going to get personal. I mean, I've been accused of being Zimbabwean at some point because I spoke out about how Zimbabwean nationals are being denied access to health. So if you speak on these issues, now they become personal. You are a Jolofina, or we know your surname is Moyana, and we know that there's Moyanas in Mozambique and there's Moyanas in Zimbabwe. That means they are your relatives. And you then sit back and like, okay, if they can be able to just simply check where my surname originates, what more can they do if I continue on reporting on this issue and they now have access to my home address or whatever? And that's where the censorship aspect of it comes in, where sometimes you will choose not to do a particular story because of the danger that might come from you reporting it. Because remember, with us, you will report, bring in the data, bring in the expert opinions, even interview migrants who are not platformed that much. There's a lot of stories about xenophobia and migrant experiences, but it's not migrants who are being asked those questions. It can be a story about a migrant being denied access, but you will have a quote from Zandile or a quote from the EFF. You hardly ever hear what that particular migrant experienced. And that's another issue that I think as a media, we need to look at, like the framing of our stories and also ensuring that journalists are safe. Because really, if things continue as they are, it's a bleak picture in terms of young journalists who also want to be the Qaanitahs of tomorrow, and they'll be like, oh wow, she ran away, because that's how it looks like. They will say you ran away, you were hiding from the truth. They hounded you until you could no longer spread the misinformation or the lies they accuse you of spreading. Yeah, so thank you.
Yeah. Look, I think what you're speaking of speaks to one statistic that I saw in the research, where it actually sets out the forms of harassment that was found, and I think one of those was threats of violence. You saw of those that were interviewed, 22% of the stats reflected threats of violence, 19% reported defamation or smear campaigns, 11% racist abuse, 11% again sexual harassment, 11% stalking, 8% hacking or doxing. And I think when you're saying a journalist, for example, in Tembisa, to whom the people in the area know where they stay, they know where your kids go to school, they know where you go to church. This is really worrying, and the bleak picture that you're talking about is now starting to be seen. And because if one journalist leaves the space, it's one journalist too many. Jillian?
Yeah, thank you for having us to talk about this topic, because I don't think we can talk enough about it.
Yeah.
My colleagues here have expressed their personal lived experiences of dealing with this kind of harassment, threats against their persons. The newsroom I lead is probably 80% female, both in terms of the journalists and in the middle management, as Qaanitah points out. And each one of them have a story to tell, very similar to my colleagues. Words like prostitute get thrown around.
Yeah.
Manipulated imagery of a female journalist's face on the body of a dog, you know, all targeting at diminishing them as people, diminishing their voice. The research as presented today is not isolated. It's corroborated by international research by the International Center for Journalists, who wrote a paper called The Chilling Effect, and highlights the fact that female journalists in South Africa, across the globe, are experiencing this kind of harassment, and all aimed at quietening the voice, quieting the questioning that has been being put forward. Qaanitah is absolutely right. This is not the same experience that our male reporters experience. And we can read a lot into that. One, your newsrooms are female dominated. And so if they're female dominated, we target the female voice that silences the critique. Two, our political leaders normalize this kind of behavior when they don't appreciate or understand the work that journalists and journalism does. You know, in the Daily Maverick, we ask ourselves, why does journalism matter? What is the role of journalism? And that is one, it's to help our audience navigate life. And two, it's to defend democracy. Our leaders, our political leaders have a role to play in that. And that is to call out when this kind of harassment is happening to journalists across, is to call that out. To also, as yourself, not make those statements when you're the subject of critical reporting. Sure, it's not fun to be under the spotlight, but at the same token, you're in a position of power. This is what you should be expecting, is hard questions to come your way on occasion. And I think, you know, in terms of the support that we can provide our journalists, we need to do better. As media houses, whether you're well-resourced or not, the responses that Qaanitah has described are not just in News 24. They've happened at Independent. Freelancers experience it. At Daily Maverick, we're constantly challenging ourselves not to fall into that trap of just say, grow with thick skin. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, when we say grow with thick skin, we too are normalizing the behavior. And if we continue to normalize the behavior ourselves, it just perpetuates. So, you know, there are a number of things. When we talk about media, we talk about mainstream media. We no longer talk about the Daily Maverick, News 24, 702, etc. Mainstream media is now the Twitters, the Facebooks, the various different social media. We have to start talking about ourselves as professional media, because we are doing our job governed by regulation. I can't just go out there and say whatever I want to about David. You know, there are rules that govern how we operate. Social media doesn't have that rule. You know, which is why disinformation and misinformation can just be spread so easily. The second thing is, we all hear about artificial intelligence, and it's the new buzz phrase. We have got to start thinking about how artificial intelligence actually amplifies this kind of violence against journalists. Just last week, a video was put out by one of our colleagues, about one of our colleagues, essentially showing, in this case it was a male reporter, behind his desk, doing a piece to camera. But was overlaid by artificial intelligence created podcast voices, basically talking about him. So all they did was feed in some information into a large language model and said, right, create a podcast out of this. And you've got two distinct voices coming across as if they're in conversation, as if it's professionally recorded, spewing lies. What is the repercussion of that? Who gets held accountable? Because I can just put it out. It can just go out onto a platform, and there is no recourse. You know, we talk about regulating the platforms. We need to get to the how. How do we do that? It's not just a South African issue. You know, in the global South, there's a big movement of saying, hey, we need to look at big tech and the work that they're doing to undermine professional journalism, undermine the efforts and information that's going out. You know, at the end of the day, the violence that is meted out in word does translate into the physical. You know, when our reporter is reporting on gangs and they get a WhatsApp that says, we know where you live, and the next one is followed by a bullet, that is a threat. You know, that this has your name on it in that way. And so we've got to look at what is our responsibility to protect. Because if journalists step out from the field, if we stop doing the work that we do, democracy itself is threatened. I think our earlier speaker mentioned that. And that's absolutely, absolutely correct.
Yeah. Qaanitah, you spoke about the chilling effect, and I think, Jillian, you're also speaking of it. And I think hearing you guys speak has come to show that would we say there is a need for, is there no political will to address these things? What needs to happen? Because I think, is this issue getting the attention it deserves? What are we seeing?
I think days like today and conversations like today and research like has been released today is a critical step in this, and we can't undermine the importance of what MDDA and Jiz and all of your collaborators here today have done. It's very, very important that we're able to diagnose a problem and measure a problem. That's very, very, very important. The second part, then comes the part of now what do you do? So everyone here has spheres of influence, right? So because we are sensitized to this problem, we're able to facilitate or even think about what it is that female journalists go through in your different areas of expertise. So that can't be undercut. Meaning, when Jillian assigns a reporter, you're thinking about the harassment. When I hire a freelancer, I need to be sure that this kid knows what she's getting herself into, and there's a level of protection. So that's the priority. And then when it comes to the political will, I think there has to be this level of tabooness. So, for example, there was a time where being openly xenophobic was okay. Now, okay, then maybe that's a bad example because the time has changed. But it must almost be like, let's take the example of homophobic, right? There was a time where politicians were just openly homophobic, right?
Yeah.
And now they would think twice because, and this is not about cancel culture or anything, but there's a enough level of public accountability
Yeah.
that says you won't dare do that. Yeah. And I think that there needs to be that same level of pushback that says you're going to think twice when you refer to a journalist by how she looks or whatever it may be. Yeah. And I think that this stays, that even when you have homophobic responses on social media, for example, it's very deliberate. And that was a conversion or coming together of society, of media, of big tech to realize, okay, we have to stop this. It's not there, but I'm saying there's still that kind of sensibility. Then the other part that the spanner that I want to throw in the works is that professional journalism, as Jillian put it, is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. When people talk about these big organizations that we work for, you understand that they're becoming ghost towns, right? And where's the money going to? The money is going to misogynistic podcasts. The money is going to the fact that politicians don't need to take interviews from, the president doesn't need to be interviewed by any of the mainstream media. Helen Zille much rather go onto a misogynistic platform because it will reach 2 million people, yeah. Right? And there's no rules that operate there. What I say to a lot of these content creators as we're trying to bridge the gap as part of the program that we are pioneering at the Debrief Network is what is called news creation, right? So we understand audiences are not going to buy newspapers. They're not going to subscribe. Yeah. But when they consume news on social media, it must be professional journalism. That's why it's called news creation. So it's professionalized. We must belong to a press council, yeah. Etc. But that level of innovation takes time and it takes buy-in from community. And the point that I've been making to the colleagues to say is that we can't bemoan a problem of social media if we don't play in that space professionally. We have to take our professional journalism to those spaces because as long as there's a vacuum, misinformation and disinformation persist. So the only interaction that users, ordinary people will have, for example, with the Sunday Times is the misogynistic or the harassment by these big talkers of the Sunday Times because in my daily scroll I don't find it there. Yeah. And so like I said, I use the word, we're becoming these like these artisanal bakers, but like artisanal journalists, where like 200 people must read our work, and it's bad for democracy.
Yeah.
So the imperative, and I know it's a bit disjointed, and to say, well, what does it have to do with online harassment and cyber misogyny? But if you don't transform to how your audience consume you, you're just redundant, and so people can get away with doing anything to you because who are you, anyways?
Marcia?
And I think journalists being given the skills to be able to operate in this new environment is very important. Fact-checking is going to be a vital skill to have, especially in the context of AI, where, like Jillian said, people can just create a podcast and make it seem like you were participating in it. So for us as journalists, we need to be able to have the tools and the skills and know the technology that we can use to verify whatever information that is out there. And it even starts with images, where an image of floods somewhere, you can just say, oh, it's just floods, yeah, and people are not involved. But even that now is being used to create false narratives and drive misinformation online. So we need to have those skills. There's institutions like your Africa Fact Check, for instance, where they are helping journalists and skilling journalists in all of these, because that is basically where we are heading now, where news consumption is online, it's on social media, and we now need to be able to use the skills and expertise to be the ones who will come with our own. If there's a video that comes out pushing misinformation, you need to have those skills to come with your skills to debunk that misinformation. And yeah, I think newsrooms should be open to allowing journalists to attend workshops, because there's a lot of institutions and organizations that are offering all of these free workshops on like online safety, on fact checking, even on the legal framework that journalists should be able to know and sometimes use to protect themselves. But you find that the attendance is very small, and that starts with editors being open-minded and allowing journalists to participate in this, because you can't have an unarmed journalist going out to the streets to report on issues when you know of the potential harm that they might face. And this starts with knowing how to be safe in certain environments. If you are living in a particular community where you think there might be danger, learn how to collaborate with journalists from other provinces, for instance. If the story is going to pose harm to you physically, find other journalists that you can collaborate, work on the story with, and they become the ones who get the news out there without you putting your life on the line. And these are the skills that you learn when you participate in all of these programs that are meant to at least make the environment endurable, I guess. Yeah, thanks.
So before we take questions from the floor, and we also monitor questions online, Jillian, I would like to ask you one question, and then we'll take questions. So outside of mental health, there is a greater risk or threat to journalism in our overall democracy. What do you think this has been the impact to newsrooms?
Well, I think we mentioned it earlier, is that the pipeline of journalists coming through the system becomes constrained. Those that stay in the system becomes less. And essentially you have fewer journalists telling the stories that matter.
Yeah.
You know, at the end of the day, a young journalist coming out of a institution, technicon or university, into the newsroom may well be able to tell a decent story, but you have to spend time in a newsroom actually doing the work to build up the understanding of what the role of journalism is and how to do it. And so it's not I land and I can break massive stories. Sure. You have to be trained. Who does that training is, yes, they are editors and news editors, but it's colleagues who are out in the field, who are out there reporting, that feed into the growth of that journalism. If they are not in the room, that journalist is not getting that added benefit of that training. And so it's constant, it's just been squeezed all the time.
So what one could read to this is, over time, beyond just one studying journalism, you'd need to probably study other things to complement this qualification. You probably need to have like a psychological qualification to be able to endure this. But are we now drawing ourselves to an environment where journalists must now go for gun training?
No.
Can I say to you, right?
Yeah.
It's not, the onus is not on them. The onus is on people who have
Yes.
who have power to say, guys, you need to invest in journalism. If you have any budgets, I mean, some of these trainings you're talking about are irrelevant trainings that don't apply to modern days. You know, you have like their bodies. I get shocked at, sometimes I go to these trainings and it's done by lawyers for journalists, and
Yeah.
I'm like, you have no clue what
Yeah.
it has to what has to happen. And so, for example, senior editors, these are people who lead newsrooms, think AI as only to be ChatGPT. You understand? So if you bring them a problem of like TikTok and or conversing about, hey, to make this person's life easy, I'm just saying a simple problem is like, do we pilot the use of, what is it, Sora or not, like the silly AI slop video editing tool or not? They don't even have the cognition for it. So how are you going to protect journalism, for example, from journalists from deep manipulation of deep fakes, etc., if you don't even understand that landscape? And then it is the conversation about media sustainability, because you guys can spend, and that's what for me makes me really upset, is that there's so much of money and resources done around media commentary and media research, but the media itself has no money. So you guys are talking about an industry that needs capacitation, and where resource exists goes to fringe endeavors that don't go to the root of the problem. What you need is a solution where a young journalist can get paid a decent wage. You know?
Yeah, I think that the sustainability of the media is a key thing that we must address. If you don't sustain the media, you can't do the training, you can't get the understanding, you know. And as the same platforms that are spreading the disinformation, that's where the money is going, in advertising. And your professional media is basically having to find multiple different ways of trying to sustain itself. You know, sustainability is a key part of the solution.
All right, I'm going to come back to you. Can we take questions from the floor? If there are any questions also online, Aya, please help us to navigate those online. Are there questions from the floor, colleagues? I see a hand at the back.
Hello, everybody. I'm Katie Katapodis, and I am the chair of SANEF's Journalism Safety and Wellness Committee. I want to thank you for having this, but also to applaud your three speakers up there. Every one of them has said the most profound things. For me, what's important is that we look externally at this online harassment for women, but that we also introspect as media houses, and we look internally. And I think it was alluded to by one of your speakers. Far too often we are seeing the weaponization of women's personal lives within a newsroom environment. Yes, we've got children, we've got lives, we're not one-dimensional, we're multi-dimensional. I promise you we can multi-skill. And I think what we need to do is acknowledge that weaponization of, oh, is your kid sick again, is not okay. Because if we're able to look at things holistically, then and only then are we able to create environments, both internal and external, that allow for women within newsrooms to unashamedly do both, and not just both, but many things. newsrooms and reporting and families and friends. As I say, we're not one-dimensional people. So for me, I would encourage our editors and our media owners to obviously acknowledge what's happening externally, but I love that that discussion's already taking place, and furthermore to introspect more and look at what is happening internally and why it is that so many female journalists just go, I can't. Actually, you know what? I've had it. Cheers. And we've got too many brilliant women who are leaving our profession. And that for me is, it's devastating and should never happen.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Tandy Smith with Media Monitoring Africa. And I mean, as an organization, we've also been doing quite a lot of work in this space, safety initiatives for journalists and ways that we can support. But my question, and I'd like some comment from the panel, and I don't know if this is more of a personal sort of reflection on what I've seen happening, but it's one thing to look at ourselves, look at the industry, you know, and try and get a hold of who is disseminating and propagating the harassment and the attacks online. But when we have our very own people in power and political leaders and those who are supposed to be setting the example of how we engage with our journalists and how we treat journalists, when we see our very own political leaders as the ones who are instigating the harassment and not always, you know, often pushing the line where it might not be a specific politician saying the exact, you know, threats or words, but the sort of narrative that gets set to encourage others to do that. You know, how do we target that, and how do we find a way to you know, essentially hold our political leaders and those in power accountable for their part in what we're seeing play out on social media? Because it's about setting the example for others to follow. So just some thoughts on that.
I'll just take that very quickly.
Yeah.
So there's one part that we didn't mention here, is that the targeting of female journalists is also motivated by the fact that in South Africa, the best journalists are the females. So for politicians, you know, you want to target the people that are looking at you closest, right? So there's that element of it. But then it comes into a secondary part of it, which is those are the often most burnt out because your load is the highest, right? So it's easier. Whereas if you tell a man you look like shit, they're not gonna, sorry I saw, but you know, they're gonna go and have a drink and it will be water off a duck's back, right? And then the third element, which Katie, it was such an important point that you raised that I wanted to just comment on, is that the incentivization by media owners and top management to promote childless women, right? Because as long as you have a child, you are not worthy of the investment from the newsroom, right? As a beneficiary of this my entire career, I can see how deliberate it is. The opportunities to travel, the opportunities, sometimes when you think twice, and there's a reality that someone has 3 kids, they're not going to be able to leave their kids. Yeah. But the point is that gendered thing gets institutionalized, it's normal then, and then the opportunities, so the opportunities to travel and to cover the big stories are still being given to the man, even though the output is far less than the woman, just on the basis that, you know, this entrenched misogyny that you can't even see. It's not even defined as it's not even defined as misogyny. It's every day. And just one quick example. At some point, I was getting job offers, and I was not in a mood to engage with job offers. So I started telling media proprietors, you know, I might be going on maternity leave. They never spoke to me again. But I'm just saying, imagine how shallow that environment is. that having children is weaponized against you.
And just to add on what she said, this speaks to the systemic issues around this. Because if politicians use women empowerment as a token to score points, but you know that in reality how they speak about women and how they speak about women empowerment, there's no alignment. They first need to see women as human beings. And human beings who are capable of greatness, and human beings who are capable of doing the same work that men can do. And because the system enables institutions, even politicians, to get away with constantly dehumanizing women, because if the first thing you are going to speak of in a professional setting, and you speak about me being a mother, you don't see me as a professional. And how then are you going to engage with me on a professional level where you don't body shame me, or you don't say, oh yes, she's emotional, or it's that time of the month, because these are words that you hear some politicians saying, and that stems from the misogyny that Qaanitah spoke about, but the system enables it because no one is held accountable. A minister can say whatever he wants or whatever she wants, and it will make headlines, and by tomorrow we move on. And that's where debunking and also coming up with the facts that, Minister, last month you were at this summit speaking about how your ministry is empowering women. Why are you today speaking about, oh, it's that time of the month? And that's the accountability part of it, where we don't allow office bearers to feel free to say whatever it is, and we complain about it and let it slide. It needs to be something that we are also deliberate about, that if you are going to say harmful things about a fellow journalist, as a journalist, it's also my duty to come and say, but this is not what your ministry stands for. You are a politician right now, you are aligned, and you said you will uphold the Constitution. And this starts with you knowing that everyone has the right to, like, freedom of safety, for instance, and their human dignity should not be undermined, especially not by politicians who say they are here to uphold the Constitution. So it's also our duty to be deliberate and protect each other, because unfortunately we are operating in a world where everyone is basically, everyone is pushing agendas against professional journalism. And it's now our duty to also come professionally so with the facts. If we have to quote what someone said 10 years ago, let's quote that as well, because they are now in a public platform. They are meant to not create and perpetuate the harm that ordinary people can get away with, because I think politicians have forgotten that they are not ordinary people. They can't say whatever they want online, but they are doing that because we also have sort of we are relaxed about our duty to hold power accountable.
Just in one last point is that as media, we also have to tell our own story. You know, when we talk about the experiences here and we talk about it in this platform, we need to take it back to our audiences. We need to do more to around media literacy, about why media matters, so that people who are the perpetrators, the bullies or the victimizers you mentioned in your opening remarks, are challenged. Otherwise, they act with impunity. There's no voice coming back at. And we've got to take on that responsibility from our side. That's the role that we can play, is to say, this is happening, this is not right, this is why it shouldn't happen. This is your role as a politician, as a government leader and official. Section 16 of the Constitution is there, and media is covered in that. And so we need to hold that right quite front and center in all the work that we do.
Any last question? I see, there's now an increase in hands. That will be our last round of hands, and in our responses, we'll then share our final thoughts as we wrap up. I think I was saying to Aya earlier that one of the threats also to this is the time limit that he's given us, because now we can't canvas this thing and share ideas, but I guess we'd have enough time to take it offline. We'll take these hands, and then when we respond, we then share our final thoughts.
Good morning, everybody. Hello. My name is Nolwandle Lala Dlala. I'm a freelance writer and journalist. I'm here on behalf of myself, but also North Coast Radio, all the way in Richards Bay. I'm honored to be here. Amazing, because the workshop MDDA conducted in Cape Town was my first workshop ever since I left the agency media. I left because I was also abused. That being said, I'm still new, I'm still young. I was an internship at a media agency, and when I was doing my interview, the last question that actually made me say, I'm definitely done now, was, so do you like sex?
Abo.
I didn't know how to answer that question in a respectable manner because this is an adult to me. I just didn't know what to say, but he went on saying the reason why I asked this question is because we go out and we go to different places and we all stay in hotels and we all get bored. Personally, for me, I was like, that's a shocker, but I'm not surprised because a lot of my peers have lost their morals just to find a job, just to have something, just to eat. But for me, it's a no-no. So where do I go? Where do my peers go beginning as internships? Who do we talk to? Which media houses do we go to? Who do we trust? Yeah, that's my question.
Good morning. My name is Steven Siahwe, Executive Director at the Black Media Owners Association. I'm also a media owner. I own Mapepe as a community newspaper, which is based in Johannesburg. I just want to have a couple of suggestions, not even suggestions, but like call to actions to everyone in the room. We've seen that in journalism, we need to protect each other. And in this industry, we've seen that people from the outside are protecting us more than from the inside. As the speakers alluded, I wish we can actually find a way to support each other online, because most media practitioners do have a certain amount of influence online because of the work they do. But however, we do not see them collaborate when attacks and online harms happen. So we just need to find a way to use those platforms, those voices, or say if one gets attacked, let's just all defend them in terms of doing that. Not just release statements, not just have media organizations condemn such acts, but someone maybe open a case somewhere, or someone just do their part in just unraveling, maybe naming and shaming those people who are hiding behind those nameless profiles. And then one other thing I wanted to suggest was an adopt a cop type of situation, because in the community media space, that's what I encourage my local reporters to do. Because we report in many areas, in many townships, I cannot be in all places at the same time trying to find a way to protect my reporters if they are facing online harm during reporting. So we have a way to say, how can we talk to that media liaison officer who can actually be at the helm of helping us immediately when we have issues of maybe somebody getting attacked physically, or there's a crime being perpetuated while we are witnessing or while we are doing our work. So we need to find a way where we say each media house has a strong connection with law enforcement. If anything happens to us, we know who to talk to in terms of making sure that concrete steps are taken, cases are opened, people are being interrogated and actually seen for what they're doing, which is wrong. So we need to actually find a way to say, if I live in Tembisa, maybe I have a Tembisa liaison officer that can actually help me at a time of need. I can call him anytime right now, because sometimes we don't have the resources to protect reporters locally, you know, and we can't be everywhere at once. And then lastly, I just wanted to really talk about the report that was highlighted once or twice. I think even the lead researcher mentioned about it. We need to actually find a way to use these reports to actually craft policies, because institutions like ICFJ, Daily Maverick, they went out of their way to do these panels, discussions, MDDA and GIZ. So coming to us as local media owners, we can have a policy not just for editorial, but for also our internal workplace operations in terms of abuse, harm, and how we talk to each other in the newsrooms. I think if that can be done, we can go to that media house and say, a particular reporter in your media house was attacked. What is the policy against you? How can we hold you accountable? If that is not in place, what do we do now to actually make sure that you do not do it again? If we have to lay charges as organizations towards that media house, that will be done, but based on that policy that was implemented by that media house. After this commitment, I think we can also say to media owners, community practitioners, let's go to our newsrooms and ask for the policy. If it's not there, let's help them create it. Oh, thank you.
Thanks.
As you wrap up, we also have one hand online from Balesa Kena. Balesa, I'm being told that we can actually hear you from the room, so I think you can go ahead and ask your question.
Good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the MDDA. I am an intern at a media agency as well, and I'm currently pursuing my honors in journalism, so it definitely is an area of interest. I think the man that actually I just stood up, I think he actually asked my question, but my question was basically just following up or piggybacking on the girl that was harassed within the media entity that she was working in. I think for me is what measures are actually taken to hold accountable those who harass young journalists within the media space, and what is the success rate if there is, because it's obviously very important to ensure that accountability for individuals who actually perpetrate this harassment against young journalists within these media organizations are brought or are held to account. And yeah, so I guess that's just really my question. And is there a success rate that maybe the panel knows about? Thank you.
Thanks, Balesa.
Colleagues, my name is Koketso Siku. I am from the Commission for Gender Equality. So my submission here is a call to collaborate. So I think you know our mandate. I'm from a Chapter 9 institution, and I think accountability to us is not just symbolic, but it is operational. So it is operational in essence that we do conduct investigative hearings, policy reviews, public education information initiatives, research, on gender and policy, institutional gender audits to ensure both public and private entities are actively transforming, right, in their structures and practices. So my call here, and I think because I found an opportunity, like being here and also just gathering the information, the narratives here, and listening very carefully, this is where I actually now want to say that the Commission for Gender Equality has a public and information initiative that is gender mainstreaming and transformation. So this is where we have taken a sectoral approach to approach sectors where there is no transformation. So maybe I can just tell you a bit about the Gauteng Provincial Office of the CGE, where we approach the National Radio Forum, right? But they're not coming to the party. And I think this is a platform where I can name and shame, because really, this is where we've identified gender in the media, and we said, let us start with the community radio stations, because the language, the sexism, really, it is, yes, it's really disheartening to listen when even a presenter, speak about diverse persons speak about, different genders or even interpreting, different things that really go against one's human right. It was just, so we thought as the CG, let's start there, but we could see that we are not finding joy. So that's why I'm saying this is a call to collaborate, because we have an ongoing program where we are targeting the media sector. So now I found a niche to say, let me take a step further, because this is my program basically. This is where we design, and this is where we say we want to make sure that we are embedding, systematic and institutional transformation within workplaces, but not only workplaces, but outside. And because now we want to look at the media, we can even move away from just looking at one portion of the media, but going into media houses, journalism and other structures that are playing big roles into the media. So this is just a call to say we have even gender audits, right? So gender audit, basically, you can go through it as a media house or as an individual, where you can assess, the systematic gender defilements, whether you do have gender vitamins, are you dismantling inequalities, the stereotypes, what is policy saying, about issues of gender and transformation. So this is a call to say, I'm here. If you are an organization that will really want to undergo a gender audit, you can collaborate with us. You are welcome to do that. And we also have, like I said, public education. So these gender audits as well help us to also come up with policy and research initiatives as well, because even in the CGE, we have a department that runs research, commissions research, and we hold public and private sectors accountable, especially where they're not transforming through our investigative hearing as well. So I'll stop there, but thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. I think there was a last hand before I then hand over to the panel, because I see the panel police is standing next to us. So we'll take that last hand, and then we'll hand over to our panelists.
All right, thank you so much. Cameron Parsons here, a broadcaster, presenter, and news editor for a community radio station. I'm going to make this short and brief. Obviously, just thinking about the aspect of safeguarding journalists, and obviously, there's a lot of probably preventative measures that could have been put in place, and unfortunately, we found ourselves at where we are now. And if you have been following recent news, you'd kind of establish that a lot of the people in power that hold a lot of the, or should be holding a lot of the accountability, is just not there. And if we look realistically, I think there would be a great transformation that would have to take place at that level in order for us to make great strides in that. So I just want to talk to the whole legislation that governs how we credit journalists, and unfortunately, maybe that's something we need to look at. And I guess it's a balancing act between self-gain and just self-protection. In that is that I feel like it's very easy to credit as a big newspaper or a big news outlet to just credit journalists for their work, but I think oftentimes that's where you would start as someone to begin harassing the fellow journalist, is you'd see the accreditation, see who it is, and then quickly establish that these journalists often have no concern about protecting themselves. Obviously, it shouldn't be their concern. It should be that of the media house. So shouldn't there be a call for maybe a uniform approach to, okay, this is a journalist's work. Should we want this journalist to do our work, do we not just go to, for example, the Citizen or the Daily Dispatch and say, look, we like this piece of work. Can we get the journalist who did this piece of work because we like their work? And also in just across social media and across even radio, for that matter of fact, in how we credit ourselves for our work, because I think there is a large gap there, and a vulnerability gap, if I can call it that, in how easy it is to actually target a journalist for their work and harass them. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, colleagues. Final remarks as we close.
I'm just grateful for this opportunity and that the conversation has happened. I think that there's been a lot of important points that have been raised, and the discussion is obviously very robust and can't end here. We very much know what the problem is. We have good ideas of what solutions could possibly be. It's up to us now to go and enact that and effect that. But to say that it's not, it can't be solved by one person, it can't be solved by one entity. And as long as that we know that we all play a role in this, we are closer than what we were when we started this morning. Thank you.
Thanks. Marcia?
Thank you again for this discussion. I think it's the beginning. And hopefully whatever we have said translates into reality for journalists. And also, media houses should be the ones who take the front seat in protecting journalists, protecting them within, giving them the skills that they need to navigate the environment. But also, we need to call on our government and society at large to see female journalists as professionals. And everyone deserves dignity. Whatever work that I do that you do not like, question that, but don't come for me as an individual and my livelihood and my family and children. There needs to be boundaries. And that starts with being able to open those cases, having the skills to trace people who are violent online, because some of them hide behind anonymity. And social media companies like Meta and X, they also need to be held accountable for monetizing the harm, because since there's incentive for perpetuating harm and pushing misinformation, we have seen that things are getting out of control. You can't even report on those platforms. So our government needs to do something when it comes to regulating these platforms. Thank you.
Jillian?
Yeah, no, thank you for having us on this discussion, and I think it is a start and it's a continuation as well of other discussions that have happened. What I'd like to see coming out of this kind of discussion is the statement of intent and actually become something that is actionable, not just lives on paper going forward. That we create spaces for our younger colleagues who experience the kind of questions that you have within our own industry. Obviously, you wouldn't have been able to go within that space to complain, but where do you go outside of that? You know, what role does an organization like SANEF play in providing that safe berth for you to be able to say, hey, this is my experience within this industry? It's not just for us to critique how others are treating us, but also to ask ourselves the hard questions and to hold ourselves to a higher standard. I think that going forward, it's a combination, it's a collaborative effect that needs to happen. As Qaanitah said, it's not one person's job, it's not one individual organization that's going to change the current situation. It's all of us holding hands to say why we need to do it, understand why you need professional media and what role it plays in a functioning democracy.
All right, everybody, thanks for giving us a chance. I think as we had started, the line shared by Mishka did say, the evidence is clear and the time to act is now. Thank you very much.
Sorry, David, before you leave, we'd like to invite Ms. Buyisa Mbini to the stage to just give a small token of appreciation to our panelists. We're also going to invite our HR manager and corporate services manager at the MDDA to also hand out in the handing out of the gifts. So if you can please just join them on stage to then shake hands, and then we'll have a picture opportunity before you step off stage. Thank you so much. Can we then just face the photographers, please, for that picture that we're going to take? And in 3, 2, 1. Do we have it? Fantastic. Thank you so much. Yes. So thank you again. Thank you, David. David is always a tricky one. You never want him to conduct anything because he'll always... We could be here the whole day. What we're going to do is just have a quick break, coffee break for 10 minutes before we then continue with our next panel discussion. So please just use this opportunity to just network a bit, but also to just grab a cup of coffee. And then we'll be back at 10 to 1. Thank you, everyone. Okay. Welcome back, everyone. We are going to continue with our program, but we're also just going to make a slight change because we're aware that we're just a bit challenged for time, and we wanted to make sure that we're able to cover, I think, quite an important component for our program today, which is the signing of the statement of commitment. So that's what we're going to go into. But just before we do that, I'm going to invite David back again to concisely and succinctly just talk about what's in the statement of commitment and what essentially we are signing and committing ourselves to. You can give him a round of applause.
Afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having me back. This segment should have been run by one of my colleagues, but they had to attend to an urgent issue. Just to check, there are statements on the table. Can everybody check? If you do not have, please raise your hand so that they quickly get one to you. It's written statement of commitment and call to action towards a safer digital space for journalists. Does everybody have it? All right. We still need more on this table. Just to confirm, the statement is also online for those that are joining us online. The statement does exist online. We will share the link or reshare the link. Those that wish to also form part of this commitment will be able to sign. There are also pens on your table. Having considered the research, I'm just going to read concisely the first few paragraphs that initiate the statement. The statement reads as follows. I, the undersigned media owners, editors or managers, journalists, media sector bodies, civil society, regulators and digital platforms, acknowledge the escalating online and offline abuse faced by journalists with a greater impact on women, queer, and other marginalized media professionals. This abuse not only undermines the dignity and safety of individual journalists, but also poses a profound threat to media freedom, public interest journalism, and democracy at large. I recognize that online violence is gendered, intersectional, and systematic, disproportionately targeting women and queer individuals with threat of sexual violence, doxing, misinformation, and coordinated trolling campaigns. These attacks often compel mental health distress, self-censorship, reputational harm, and in some cases, withdrawal from the profession entirely. I recognize and acknowledge the lack of legislative frameworks and policies to all forms of online violence. However, there is with various laws that address harmful digital communication,
distribution of harmful content, and electronic harassment. This includes Cybercrimes Act of 2002, Protection of Harassment Act 17 of 2011, Electronic Communications and Transactions Act 25 of 2002, and the Films and Publications Act 65 of 1996. Therefore, I take cognizance of the principles of UNESCO's Social Media for Peace initiative and commit to actively fostering a digital ecosystem that promotes peace, inclusion, and respect for human rights. We commit to being active agents of change in building a digital media landscape in which all journalists are respected, protected, and free to express themselves without fear. The commitment will then read, we, as a stakeholder in the media and digital communication system, I affirm my shared responsibility to foster a safe digital environment and pledge to. Those commitments, colleagues, you will then read. The statement then, when you turn it over, has a call to action. The call to action is also targeted. There's a call to action for journalists and media practitioners. There's a call to action for media organizations. There's a call to action for digital companies. There's a call to action for government, regulatory, and key public institutions or bodies. When you turn to the next page, there's also a call to action for civil society, industry bodies, and academia. Once you found that you fall within a specific category, and you also commit to fostering change in the digital media environment, and you also want to do what we've said, which is answering to the call to act now, you will then sign at the bottom there. Once you've signed, you'll raise your hand. One of my colleagues will come and collect the statement. But we also have another statement that we've printed out that appears in front of us. I will then ask my colleague, Ms. Mahaule, to call out the industry bodies that have agreed to sign publicly the statement in their commitment towards a safer digital space for journalists. Kanye?
Thank you. Hey, you just called my surname wrong. My ancestors. You will have to deal with them. Okay, thank you so much. Yes, so we do have the statement of commitment online. All of us will be able to sign it from there as well. And you have copies in front of you. You can put your signatures and hand them over to one of the team members. For this particular purpose, we will have only 5, because we only have 5 spaces for signatures there. So we will call out only 5 organizations to represent, and then we'll keep collecting signatures online. The first institution to come and sign is CGE. We can clap as they come. Also representing Films and Publications Board. We will have MMA as well represented. And then Jillian Green, Daily Maverick. Thank you so much. So we can all just move towards the statement of commitment page. I don't know who has, you have a pen. Is it a pen or a marker? Yes. And then you will have to put in your name and surname, signature, organization, and date. One at a time. This is the most crucial Okay, I see. Okay, I stopped.
Yes. I'm also going to ask
GIZ is
Gwanda to
coming.
just come closer to make sure that we're also able to capture the images, please. Not so fast in your signing. It's a, it's a very important moment, so we want to make sure that we're able to capture this. Gwanda, are you ready with the camera? Okay, let's go ahead. Today is the 20th. Ladies and gentlemen, hands please for CGE for signing on to the statement of commitment. And then up next we have the FPB. We smile and sign. Can we have some background music? This is a cheerful moment. A round of applause for the FPB, please. Next up, we have Media Monitoring Africa. Moxie Africa. They've just rebranded. Anyone. Are we projecting online for people to see the signing? Beautiful. A round of applause, please, for Media Monitoring Africa, rebranded as Moxie Africa. And next we have Daily Maverick. Yes. A round of applause for Daily Maverick, everyone. And then next we have Sanif, represented by Qaanitah Hunter. So please give them a round of applause. A round of applause for Sanif, everyone. Thank you. I'm also being told that the NAB, the National Association of Broadcasters, has also made a commitment online and that they've signed, so we can also give them a round of applause, please. Katie, don't go too far. I'm going to ask everyone to just please stand in front of the statement of commitment so that we can take a picture. I'm also going to invite Bui Sambini as well and Zanele to please come to the front so that we can represent the relevant stakeholders as well. If we can all just line up in front of the placards, please. Please Just a bit. So Zanelli, you can stand on that side. Wonderful. And then we'll take a picture. David is here. Okay, fantastic. And then everyone else in the room, please remember that you also have your own copy in front of you. Please make sure to read it and to also sign it. Also take pictures of yourself signing it, so that there's evidence and we can share and celebrate in this moment with you. Our colleagues are around and they will be coming around to collect your signed copies as well. So please also give yourselves a round of applause. We're now going to move on to our next panel. This is going to be a reflection on the research findings that were discussed earlier. And to do this, I'm going to invite Mr. Litabo Tibezo, the Manager for Sector Development and Research and Outreach at the Media Development and Diversity Agency. And then I'm going to also give him a chance to call up and introduce his panelists. Please give him a round of applause.
Down again. Do you want it down?
After you're done.
Oh. No, I don't. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I promise I will not take long, unlike the other guy who was here. My name is Letabo, responsible for research at the MDDA. Yeah, I think this is the graveyard slot, so please do bear with us. I think in the spirit of it's a time to act, and I think everybody taking ownership. The purpose of this discussion is just about that, hearing different voices, perspectives, and ensuring that everybody is on board, ensuring that we have a safer online space for journalists and also those who are vulnerable or marginalized. I'm going to call our first panelist, Dr. Natisha Duki from the HSRC. She's a senior specialist researcher there. Also the rose amongst the thorns in this session. Second panelist is Dr. Mashilo Buluka. He is the CEO of a new, is it still new, dog? Startup, OS Lab, Online Safety Lab.
He's the former CEO of the Film and Publications Board as well. And then lastly, in your program, it states that Advocate Makosazana Lindhurst was going to represent the FPB. She had a pressing matter to attend to, so he'll be replaced, or she'll be replaced rather, by Mr. Makosane Macheke, who's Senior Manager for Research Analysis and Regulatory Affairs, Regulatory Development. Let me just... I tried to be modern this time and have my questions on my laptop and not write them down. So please bear with me. I'm also one of those people with very long passwords. I think maybe let me start off with you, Dr. Duki. GBV, as we all know, is quite a problem. In our country, in the first panel we heard that South Africa is quite a violent country. And it seems like the violence just manifests itself in different ways. And now, on the social platforms, on the online platforms. Are we in maybe a position to quantify the socioeconomic and developmental impact of gender-based violence?
Thanks so much. I think always it's good to start with the positives. And one of the positives is being here. Setting the scene for something that 31 years later is still not too late. It's a time for us to act. But at the same time, let's unpack all of this. So last year, we had the first national gender-based violence survey. I was part of that team, or I'm still part of that team, but it's a pity that this part of gender-based violence was not featured there. And so the question I would ask, or what I would want, is that technology facilitated gender-based violence also has a space under that. Because these are all forms of violence, and we need to act accordingly. When we speak about socioeconomic disparities, what's important is coming back to that statement that was made in the first panel and prior. We are a violent country, there's no doubt about that. But where does this stem from? And often enough I've asked this question, even with physical and sexual gender-based violence. Why are perpetrators perpetrating? Why? Where does this stem from? And it comes back to various things. One of the first being that 31 years ago, we finally saw the light of democracy. We finally saw people of color having a say and inclusivity bearing witness to that. But 31 years later, there are still massive problems with inclusivity. We speak about inclusivity at conferences, at symposiums, an event of priority like this, but are we really inclusive? And when we speak about violence, especially like today where we're speaking about technology-facilitated gender-based violence, are we holding those accountable? Because the question, if I have to play devil's advocate, is, yes, there are men out there perpetrating violence against women and children, and that's because of the system they've grown up in. And it comes back to the socioeconomic problems, the fact that the communities they were grown up, the households they were in. We saw last year the gender-based violence survey indicated that 74% of men indicated that by the age of 15 they had seen or experienced some kind of emotional trauma or physical trauma, and that was to violence. Seeing parents being violated, especially mothers, seeing fathers being very violent, and so that speaks volumes. But then playing devil's advocate is, what then is of people who violate women through online media? You know, what propels them to do this? And we can see that it comes from a place of where I actually think it has to do with hate, for the fact it comes back to what the journalists were saying, well, it was so important this morning, is that we know for a fact there are a lot of women journalists who are doing really great work out there. And irrespective of whether this person, this journalist is queer, is a woman, is from any form or kind of vulnerable community, that does not give us the right to violate that person online or in person. And so it comes back to asking, are we not doing enough? What are we doing with our children, for example? Bringing it back to socio-economic norms. Social norms, cultural norms are things that go hand in hand when we talk about South Africa. Unfortunately, we rely too much on cultural norms and social norms and blame it on those for our actions. And we need to be held accountable for that. So, for example, if a politician is the one instigating or is responsible or who has said, that woman is reporting on this thing about me, sort her out. How do we hold him or her accountable as a politician? Yes, there are forms of higher authority, but we need to hold them accountable. And what stems from them doing that? Is it hatred? Is it something to do directly with socioeconomic norms? Has it got to do with power and the fact that there is an abuse of power? Is it all of it? Is it a systemic problem that is continuously plagued South Africa because people in power, people who think they have power, will perpetrate any form of violence? And so in this scenario today, I would say that when we look and unpack this, there's so many dimensions to look at it, and I'm just going to touch briefly because I know of time. Firstly, looking at the human dimension is so important in this. People who perpetrate this need to be aware of how it's impacting those victims. They are not just spilling out these vile words online. They are not just making these threats with pictures of bullets. These are impacting people's mental health to the state, to the phase that women, or journalists rather, are saying, I'm done, I cannot do this any longer. It's not just impacting them in terms of, I'll leave my job as well. It's taking away their livelihoods, their dignity first, before everything else. So as we unpack socio-economic factors, I think it's so important that we press upon that what we fought for 31 years ago, and we are still fighting for. My call to action would be shame on South Africa, shame on us, that 31 years later, we are still talking in these narratives and spaces. What are we going to do about it? What are we going to change? So that next year or the year after, when we decide to redo the study and find out if there's been any changes, that we are not back sitting in this environment again and pledging to something that is ongoing. And that as that continues, women, queer, and disabled journalists continue to fight those struggles.
Thanks, Doc. I want to latch on to the issue of inclusivity that you raised earlier in my follow-up question. Just maybe to the FPB, around your mandate and legal framework. How effectively does the FPB Act enable the FPB to address emerging digital harms such as online harassment, disinformation, or technology-facilitated gender-based violence?
All right. Thank you.
You can switch on your mic. You good? Oh yeah, it's on.
Thank you. Yeah, the Film and Publication Board, its mandate, it's broad. It's broader than protection of journalists. Although journalists is one group in society, they will and they can benefit from the protection that comes with the Film and Publication Board. So the challenge with the enforcement is it comes with development in the technology space, media technology space. The growing volume of content, technology facilitated content, user generated content. So all these things, they complicate things for not only for the Film and Publication Board as a regulator that regulates films, games, and other publications, but other regulators, like your .ZETNA, digital regulators like your .ZETNA, your ICASA, information regulator, and so forth. But what I wanted to say is that reporters or journalists, they can report the incidences of abuse when they experience them online to the Film and Publication Board, especially when they relate to violence, when they relate imminent violence, when they relate to hate and propaganda for war, because that's what we regulate. Like I said, the biggest problem is when it comes to social media, and a lot of user-generated contents, because users, they are becoming the biggest perpetrators. You know, in the olden days, we used to worry about big technology companies or even media companies as the perpetrators of propaganda and disinformation and so forth. But now you have ordinary people who are big in the space, and they can produce a lot of content that is harmful to everyone, including journalists. But also, what I can say is that this reporting mechanism that we have, it's a bit of challenge, because we're not having a lot of people who are coming and reporting cases. One of our managers who's responsible for this portfolio, public complaints, he was saying that most of the victims, as we investigate, they withdraw, So you can see there are similar patterns that were mentioned in the findings of the study, So the issue of collaboration is very important. I think we're going to talk a lot about it and hammer on it a lot. So long as there will never be a time where we have like absolute protective regulatory and legal framework, there will always be gaps. But as we are constantly reviewing and improving on our regulatory framework, what should always be critical is how we collaborate together to close the gaps, to align in terms of implementation and enforcement. I think that's what is very critical. Thank you.
Yeah. Before I move on to Dr. Buluka, let me just lash on what you acknowledging that there are gaps. And one of the key issues in the research is that there are regulatory gaps. And I think there's a general understanding or consensus that the current framework that the FPB has focuses on consumer protection, focusing on hate speech, incitement, and non-consensual images. To close those gaps, what legislative amendments are required to explicitly cover online harassment targeting of journalists? Particularly also now, given that you have the policy, the white paper process taking place.
Yeah. So there's quite a number of, I would say, even the Film and Publication Board itself, there's an opportunity to make certain amendments. In any environment, if enforcement is not effective. You might want to improve in that area. Like for instance, for me, I would mention, for instance, the issue of penalties. You might want to improve on making penalties more stringent, more painful. So that's another. And then also, as I mentioned, the issue of user-generated content. We need to find a way to address that issue, because the act as it is now concentrating more on commercial distributors, you know. But the world, the digital world has evolved, where now even ordinary users can generate content that is equally helpful as. So they must be made to account, you know, users. So those definitional amendments also maybe needs to be looked at. So those are some of the issues that I could raise.
Yeah. Doc, if I can pose the same question to you, Dr. Bullock. You, I think also of recent, wrote an opinion piece around the white paper. And my first question to you would be, what legislative amendments are required to plug the gaps? And my second question is, in our informal discussions, you spoke around how many of these attacks are coordinated. And there's almost like a cartel where groups of people are well-resourced and well-funded all over the world to perpetuate this kind of violence. So how do we even start pinning down these groups as well? And yeah, what from a maybe a justice or policing perspective, how do we also then ensure that all the relevant departments within the security cluster play their role in tracking these people down?
Let me first take this opportunity to thank you, MDDA, for inviting me. This is an organization that is so closer to my heart. I'm the first board member of this entity, and every time when I see this trademark, I remember the discussions that we had in 2004. There were various trademarks that we had to look at. But this one, I remember people saying, Marcia, we like this because you drive Audi, but because if you look at it, it looks like an Audi trademark. So, and MDDA is always closer to my heart, and I'm happy that you are organizing this. Secondly, normally in South Africa, we seasonalize problems, including gender-based abuse. If you look at it, our conversation around gender-based abuse will be around August. And then once after August, we leave it to go to the next. And I'm happy that the MDDA managed to break that trend and still have this discussion during October, which is something very interesting. The organization that I'm leading is called Online Safety Lab. We specialize in online safety. Key amongst others is content moderation, awareness, and so forth. Key amongst the programs that we run is online gender-based harms or online gender-based violence program. And we do that as a non-commercial program, and that's why I think for us partnership is very important, because without partnership we won't be able to succeed. We do training, we do research, we do awareness like I've mentioned. And one of the initiative that is currently underway, we hope we'll be able to launch it, is what you call a helpline for online victims, which we hope to launch it in January next year. And it's going to be a kind of closer collaboration with the international world, because I think there are currently only 3 or 4 of those that exist in the world. So we'll be amongst those that do that. This is simply because he mentioned the issue of reporting. Why are victims of online abuse, including journalists, not reporting it? Is because they see it as a secondary trauma, and knowing that sometimes this thing won't go anywhere, which means I think we need to do something about it. But for me, the biggest issue is, one, South Africa has got legislations that can enable us to take minimum steps. We just need to enforce that. If you look at the Film and Publications Amendment Act, number 11 of 2019, it gives you two categories. One is harmful, the other one is prohibited. Now, under harmful is any content, that's defined in the Act, is any content that has the capacity to cause harm, psychosocial harm. Therefore, online abuses such as whether it's doxing, whether it's deep fakes, they can be listed there. And then from there, the other one is prohibited, which is your hate and whatever. Out of that, the expectation, Jojo, is from MDDA, from FBB, is you expect the regulator to do, or like FBB to do regulations around that, to list that. You go to UK, they've got only one, UK and the whole of the European Union, they've got only one category called illegal content across the EU. And then from there, the regulators will list what constitutes that. So for us, for me, is enforcement and more enforcement. Because if you are not enforcing, you can talk legislative amendments until you turn a blind eye. Implement the act, let those that are responsible be taken into account. One of the cases that we are dealing with, in short, relates to doxing. It's a journalist, and it's quite coincidental, because what we receive as part of this online victim support, we receive a lot of cases. In other words, people who are victims, they report the matter to us. But this is a sad story, in the sense she's a young journalist, and her biggest sin was to stand for other journalists who are being victimized online. And then the whole compound, including her ex, joined. And what we normally do in that kind of cases, the first step that we do is, because sometimes you don't have anyone to talk to, which is quite key. We link her up with a global WhatsApp group of online victims, then so that you are not alone. Then the second step is to check where this case is coming from. Although her case of over 24 months started in South Africa, it was taken over by a compound in, because this is a concerted attack coming from different groups. We, through our collaboration partnership internationally, we referred the matter to the US authorities, FBI. They're handling it, and then after realizing that the victim is South African, then they've got connection here, which is now, this is where the matter is being handled. For us, those are some of the steps that we undertake. But the key thing, which is very important, is, you see, an attack on female journalists is actually an attack on the Constitution. Because, as it was indicated here, if you look at all the industry, including the one that you are in, is over 65% feminine. So, even this woman that I'm talking about, she got away from journalism practice. She withdrew completely. She shuts all the media accounts. She hasn't been working. And then in our last conversation, she said to me, I'm actually thinking, because I can't make ends meet. But the other cost that we don't often talk about for victims is the cost of therapy. Because the psychologists need to be paid. Imagine you are no longer working because you have withdrawn, you have shut down all your accounts, because she was working largely online. Her platform is digital. Therefore, it means for all these months, because it started in 2023 December, and then it became worse. Since the beginning of the year, she hasn't been working. So what? But she still needs that psychosocial support. And then the question is, what is it that she needs to do? She has to make ends meet. She has to pay all the psychologists. Otherwise, they can't help her. Because her plea is simple. Can this thing stop? I'm not going to report this because it's going to take me years and then it's going to be a second. So for me, is let's start first with enforcement of the laws that we have. And then where there are challenges, then let's improve. Because we haven't actually implemented, whether it's the Film and Publications Act, whether it's the Cyber Crimes Act, we haven't really exhausted those. Like he said, they don't deal with a lot of cases. But how do we enforce the little that we have and move on? Finally, I'm happy with what Singapore is doing. Singapore is coming up with a new legislation called Online Safety, Relief and Accountability Act. It's going to be implemented, I think, before the end of the year. First of all, other than making sure that the victims get relief from, these online harms, it gives, or it forces the platform owners to deal with anonymous accounts, because a lot of these attacks, like in the case that we deal with, are anonymous. Therefore, before you register, you must ensure that, or before you register an account as a platform, whether it's TikTok, whatever, you must make sure that you got the details of this person, so that if there are any transgressions or non-compliance, then the law may require that you divulge that, because at the moment people are hiding around that. Yeah. So these are some of the things that can happen. But for me, is South Africa, we've got enough legislations, we've got enough institutions. Let them do their job. Let us enforce the minimum laws that we have. And then whatever challenge, we can improve as we go along.
Thanks, Dr. Bulu. Dr. Duki, you spoke about inclusivity, and you asked the question, are we doing enough? I think given the report's evidence of GBV against women journalists, how can we, the people in the room, people on the online platform, integrate a gender-sensitive approach in the work that we do, whether it be policy making, a gender-sensitive approach towards fiscal budgeting.
I think anything that we are doing, whether it's budgeting, whether it's affecting policy, our strategies, our frameworks, we need to be inclusive of the people who have been affected. Without that voice, it's kind of saying like, when we get rid of the women journalists, the men will do the job. We can't let that narrative come through. We need to be saying, if these women are facing these harms, whatever form, whether it's cyber, whether it's physical, we need them in the room so that we can look at their side of things and what they need. What are their needs? Take, for example, what Doctor has just spoken about. A woman has been violated online over 24 months. What can we do? I mean, one is the narrative of her mental health decline, the fact that she does not want to work in that space anymore, she does not find any enjoyment or fulfillment, and we need to be asking, what are the immediate steps? There are immediate steps. Can we get her those support systems? What are the support systems for these journalists? Where can they seek them? We know reporting is a problem. What are we going to do in terms of reporting as a next step? And then long term, to ensure that there isn't any re-victimization in any form. Because we've seen when people report what happens. Often enough, there is re-victimization occurring. How can we ensure from the immediate to the intermediate and to the long-term steps that we give a voice to the people affected, and that we allow them to make a contribution to these policies, to these actions? Because without them, if we haven't faced a form of violence, it's very easy to say we can support, we can do this or that. But if you have those voices in the room, like we saw in the panel earlier, we saw those were lived experiences. Those weren't people just making up things or weren't people just sharing a narrative. These were lived experiences. It was also experience of young journalists saying, I go to this interview and suddenly, instead of being asked, forgetting about what your qualifications are, forgetting what your skill set is, but you being asked if you enjoy sex, and demeaning you in that stance. So we need to be having a collective and working together. And when we speak about the collective, who do we have? There are media houses that we need to be inclusive of. The people affected. We need civil society to play a role, because from what we have seen today, it is very clear that a lot of people do not understand technology-facilitated gender-based violence. And that is why we get these disgusting narratives that come about where people are saying, you should deal with it, just ignore it. How long are we going to ignore something, especially when it moves from something so-called innocent where they say, I'm going to come after you, I know your address. And even if you don't have kids or you have kids or whatever your household has, the fact remains that it starts to get more dangerous. And if we are not taking a stance at the very instance you are first attacked online, we shouldn't be waiting for this person to be cornered. There's a series on Netflix, I just came across it, just by very much chance. And it speaks to what the doctor was saying, something about this woman was building an app. So she was building an app. Her husband was quite a senior in the company. And it started off as just, sending her these messages, putting her face with the dog's body and things like that. And eventually it got worse where, they were sending signals, actually sending things to the household. And then it got a step further and more dangerous when they had noticed that she had a 14-year-old niece. And one of that compound decided that he would lure the 14-year-old niece with a nice, handsome picture of himself. And this 14-year-old is vulnerable. Because remember, teenagers facing so many different types of challenges in life. And one of them is acceptability in society. If you're a bit darker skinned, then you want to be looking as beautiful or being called as beautiful as other people. And suddenly, when the little older man gives you that attention, sometimes it's appealing. It's appealing for a child who's vulnerable. And that's what happened with this person. This child fell for it, and before she knew it, she was so entangled in it that she was taking pictures. It went from minimal clothes to nude pictures. And we know what happens with that. Before time, is these people online or these compounds will start to extort money. And that's the case that happened. They asked for the credit card of her grandmother, and the grandmother's credit card was abused over time. And by the end of that series, you saw that it just got worse over time because there wasn't any reporting mechanisms. The boss himself was somebody, or the leader, the team leader was somebody who said, but you shouldn't get involved in these things. Just concentrate on building your app. That's what you should focus on. It's like telling a journalist, no, go to Tembisa and you sort that out. Find out what's going on at the hospital there. But you're not worried about what's happening to that journalist. Maybe her family is being, threatened. Maybe they're sending her pictures and saying, oh, these are your kids. We'll come after them. And it's not just threats, it's really belittling. And so it speaks to the fact that we need to come together as a collective. We signed a pledge today. And we need to be held accountable, all of us that sign it. It's not just signing a document and walking away saying, we'll take some pictures and put it on social media. If that's what we've come to do, then shame on us. We've actually come where we sign this and we all do our part. As a scientist, my role is to go back to my team and say, I was here, what are we going to do to support this? Where we get rid of this form of violence, or any form of violence against women or journalists. How can we ensure that the voice of journalists is inclusive so that 5 years from now, when the HSRC does another survey, that we speak about other forms of violence, including technology-facilitated violence, and that we create more evidence base. Of course, we've already got this evidence base, 2 reports. One from last year which spoke to the other forms of violence, which was physical, sexual, economic, psychological, emotional. But now we're bringing in technology facilitated, and all these forms are important to talk about. But we need to move away from this whole anecdotal awareness. We keep talking about awareness, and we've gone past that stage. In 2025, we cannot remain in an awareness stage. We need to be actionable. We need to be saying what is operational now. What can we do as media houses, big techs, civil society, government initiative, academia, research institutions. We need to come together and ask these uncomfortable questions amongst ourselves and hold ourselves accountable of why haven't we done this before? Why did we wait for 2025 for this to happen? And in those conversations also include journalists and specifically people that were affected by that form of violence.
Thanks, Doc. I think let me take advantage of the commitment you've made now. And my follow-up was going to be, you had mentioned that you are part of the team that developed the national GBV strategy, and you acknowledged the absence of technology-facilitated GBV. Is there an opportunity to collaborate, to also work towards developing the online safety strategy?
Absolutely. I think there's never a time we should not be open to collaborate. I think if we want to work in silos, all we're going to get is where we started, we probably take 2 steps forward, and within a matter of months, we'll be 20 steps back. But if we collaborate, as I said, we put ourselves in that difficult spaces to ask difficult questions, not only to other stakeholders, but also to ourselves. Why didn't we do this? How can we be held accountable? It's like we said in the beginning in the first panel. Are we willing to see, I was having some conversations before the day started with some of the colleagues where we spoke about one of the videos, the most, well, I call it notorious, but lots of people call it famous video of this guy who bragged about killing the girlfriend, you know, on social media, and how people picked up the narrative, especially a lot of men who said, yeah, she deserved it. She should have obeyed you. She should have listened to you. Are we still listening to that and we are being okay with that? When we see a video pop up, now we know this on Instagram, Facebook, all of that, we might have a selected amount of people on our, who we call friends, and people that we know, but because there's a lot of advertising and things going forward, you'll see when you open up your own social media page, that a lot of it will have people you can follow, people you know you can befriend. My question is, what do we do when we see something like that occurring on those mediums? Are we going to just scroll past it and say, not my problem, it's this woman's problem if she's being harassed or she's being online violated? Or if we see a video of where a man is doing something, or even if we go into the street corner right now and we see a man beating a woman, are we all going to stand with a camera and say, let's put that on TikTok? You know? Or are we going to say, how do we stop that man? Stop that so that that woman is protected. And that comes back to the fact that if we are there scrolling past it, we are standing on a roadside curb and seeing someone being violated, then we are to blame. And we need to be held accountable. So, of course, collaboration is absolutely essential in all ways and forms. And this event today shows that just how much of commitment we can have. We saw the signing, we individually signed ours as well. And this is a call to action from all bodies. It even comes down to people not sitting in these spaces. People like school teachers. Children should be taught this even in primary schools. We shouldn't be waiting for a child to reach high school where they've made informed decisions already. Yeah. I've given talks, in the month of September, I gave talks at schools to children 10 to 12 years old. I work with those age groups of children currently. And it was astounding to see when I spoke about cyberbullying. The children, the majority of them went as far as saying, but doc, we'll die. We'll die. Why is it that in 2025 our children are not saying maybe it will happen, differently? They've already gone past everything else and said we're going to die. Is that what we're instilling in our children, to live a life of fear? To live a life where they always have to watch over their backs because anybody will violate them at any given time? So we need to be in all those spaces. Collaboration is not just people who are sitting in the room today. Collaboration needs to come from all. And I think the biggest challenge should be from government. Why aren't they here? Because we need to hold them accountable as well. A lot of the decisions we allow to, out of respect, we say it should come from there. But we have departments. We have the social development. We have the women and youth. All of those ministers should be held accountable to say, what are you doing? What is your role? Because when they put a hand on the Bible and they take their oath to come into power, that oath is meant to say that I am there as part of you, a civil person who was once a civil being, to say I am now there to hold your rights in high esteem. I am there to be your voice. Often enough, people are being violated and their voices are drummed down even more. And that comes back to reporting. Why would someone report in a country where they're not being heard? Why? Because it's going to go into ears, come out the other side. they either face re-victimization, they're either going to face even more violence and other forms of it, or have their family endure it, and that vicious cycle will continue. So again, we need to start collaborating, we need to start working together, and we need to start in our own spaces. We need to go back to our households today as a challenge and tell ourselves, we signed this here. What are we going to tell to our families? What are we going to tell to our children? Are we going to say, I've signed something and then forget about it because it's filed here with you guys in MDDA? No. It should be that call to action that today we've signed it on the 20th of October. 20th of October 2026, we should not be having the same conversation. We should have improved.
That's true. Thanks, Doc. And in fact, we had invited those ministries, Deputy Minister in Women and Children in the Presidency, Deputy Minister of Social Development, Deputy Minister of Justice as well. We had invited also some of the big techs, and I think, thank God that Google is here. I mean, TikTok is here. But I think that spirit of being accountable is largely absent, and I don't know how we would be able to foster that. Mr. Macheke, the doc is talking about, and I think Dr. Bullock also touched on that, how people are afraid to report, and the re-victimization is part of the reason. So how can the FPB strengthen enforcement when victims are often withdrawn, or rather when victims often withdraw complaints due to fear, lack of recourse, or distrust in the legal system? And secondly, we now know that these harms are also of a cross-border nature. So what measures are in place to deal with online content hosted outside South Africa, considering that the cross-border nature of digital harms?
Okay. Yeah. So the issue of reporting, I think it goes down to the issue of implementation and enforcement of all the existing legislative frameworks. So like I said, some of the gaps is not necessarily because one institution is not doing its job or the FPB is not doing. The problem is how we collaborate and make sure that things are efficient. So you want that when someone reports the matter, you want them to feel that they are protected. But you find that that is not our, as a FPB, is not our competence.
Yeah.
To make sure that someone is protected. What we can do is to make sure that the information is gathered in a manner that when it's submitted to law enforcement, it can be speedily facilitated in terms of making sure that you bring the perpetrator to the book, So there is that process where we work with law enforcement agencies, we train them, and so forth. But citizens being citizens out there, when they don't feel safe, there's nothing you can do. You just get frustrated. So all arms of the state need to be effective in terms of implementing the good policies that we have. And most of the policies that we have, they are good, they are effective, only if they get implemented. So it goes down the issue of collaboration that we all talking about, but also it's also the issue of being a good citizen that my colleague is talking about. That as citizens, sometimes we want to look to government and the policies to protect us. But you find that in our spaces, private spaces, we do those things. I worked a lot in economic development, industrial policy, and financial environment, you know. If once I mention these issues, you already know what the problem is, you know. Wherein there will be good industrial policy projects, small business development project, and so forth. But what happens is, when you have funding projects, what happens? The policy, the benefits of the policy, they don't reach to the people, you know. Just because some of us, we do not sort of respect the Constitution, we do not respect the dignity of the people. So that's another thing that we need. Hence, awareness is very important. Educational awareness and advocacy programs are very important everywhere. And also collaboration is very important. Not only collaboration in terms of activities, but because that should also lead in terms of budget. So you will find that there are organizations that got bigger budgets, but when you streamline and target the project, the problem together, then you are then able to have a bigger impact than when you are fragmented and sometimes you want to compete. So that is the problem. The issue of online content outside of South Africa, it's also a big challenge because it's also issue of cultural norms. Our cultures are not the same. Our morals and values are not the same. You know, we don't see things the same because also our constitutional frameworks are not the same. So with that, it's very important that digital regulators, they come together and sort of harmonize in terms of content, moderation, but also harmonize in terms of sort of media or digital literacy, education and advocacy, but also mobilize in terms of enforcement, you know, because someone can just sort of perpetrate harmful content knowing that in South Africa, knowing that they don't live in South Africa, so it's going to be hard for South African authorities to get to you. So also at that level, we should be able to work together internationally to make sure that there is collaboration.
Right, thanks. Dr. Vuluka, the issue of content moderation keeps on coming up. The findings show that platforms like Facebook, X, TikTok fail to adequately address or moderate misogynistic or harmful content. So what mechanisms can we put in place if there is a need? Or how can we improve on current mechanisms to hold big tech accountable? And my second question is, how can we ensure that platform algorithms and moderation policies are transparent, fair, and context sensitive to the Global South, given the issue of norms that Mr. Machek has raised? Thank you very much. My colleague from JIZ, Zanella, asked me a question actually as to what is the preventative measures that we take? Because normally we come after the incident has happened. That's why we've got all these cases. And that's why I always want to emphasize the issue of enforcement. You see, in other regions, which is something that we are trying to do in South Africa, which is what you do as online safety lab, is online risk assessment. Because if you go to Europe, Australia and so forth, in Asia, platforms are required by law to conduct online risk assessment on any product that they sell to the public, product or service. In other words, whether you are TikTok, you should be able on quarterly basis to do that assessment, submit the report to the regulator. So that before, in other words, you must show us what is the potential risk of people using your platform other than that which you are intending to do. We have tried that. We have been trying to push this with the platforms in South Africa, because whether you go to Australia, it's the same platforms, trust me, all of the same, unless the toxic ones that are small. The big ones, Telegram, Meta, and so forth. But because there's no regulatory push in South Africa, then they don't want to do that. We have been trying to say, hey, we even do some preliminary assessment on our part. Then we show them. We say, this is what your platform is being used for, whether it's X, whatever. But because there's no regulatory push, they don't see that as something that they must do. And for me, that's the first step, because the first form of defense against online harms, whether it's for female journalists, whether it's for general public, or even for children, start with the platforms, because they are the ones that are distributing this content. They are the ones through which deep fake is being created, and they don't do anything about it. And if they don't do anything, that's why in other countries the issue of penalties is very key. Now, where do you also see the problem on the African continent? Earlier this year, the African Union's Commission on Human Rights and People's Rights passed a resolution, 630. You must Google it. It emphasizing two things: adequate moderation and fact-checking. But it only provides that as a guideline. It doesn't tell you what happens if a platform doesn't make sure there's adequate moderation. And one of the things that you've been saying is that if you look at, I mean, do we have adequate moderators? They've got their own challenges, which I think is another abuse that I want us to talk about. Content moderators, a lot of them are Africans, based in Kenya. A lot of them are women. That level of abuse there, the level of abuse where you have to be, as a moderator, it's not an easy task. You see this beheading, you see this violence and whatever as a woman. Some of them pregnant, losing their babies. Some of them died. I mean, this year we buried one from Nigeria. So you see how much of harm is happening in this content environment. But what is it that the platforms are doing? Now you ask me, how do we make sure that there's adequate moderation? It boils down to the same thing. One, enforcement. You see, you can come up with others such as your education, your capacity training. But if these things are still happening there, what's going to happen? And then there's no recourse. That's why I love countries such as your Singapore, your UK, who on weekly basis they find these big platforms, so that they need to know that their content must be moderated. If we are not doing anything about it, I'm telling you, next year, Doc, we'll be sitting here talking the same thing. If you listen, and I'm happy that the stories of those members of the panels that were here, they were speaking their own. And I'm saying, and this is a sad thing when they said to me, or when they said to us that, imagine you say, I'm facing this thing, and they say, no, just develop a thick skin. Who amongst us can develop a thick skin when your pictures are being manipulated into deep fakes and put on a porn, and you think, no, you can hold a brave face? You'll never. That's why some of them, what do? They withdraw and leave journalism completely. And then they become unemployed. And that's why I say, if women leave journalism and take into account the fact that over 65% of the industry is feminine, it's threatening our own constitution around access to information, because you are going to have lesser and lesser journalists reporting and making sure they've got access to information. So for adequate moderation, we must hold these platforms to account. And the only institutions that can do that are the regulators. So if the regulators can hold them to account, I think you'll see an improvement. So that when you come with education, you were with me, and I'm happy we did that last week. We were on online safety awareness in schools, rural schools. And I think why do we do that? Is because children at high school, they are beginning to develop or generate deepfakes that they use against their female counterparts. So unless we start this chain, imagine when they grow up, they are already that so sophisticated, they are already getting into that culture. So we think we are dealing with this culture, but you're only cutting the leaves.
Yeah.
The roots are growing. So more enforcement so that whatever standards or regulatory tools that we have as a country, including online risk assessment, that is put in place, then must be complied with. Because if you put legislation no one is complying with, there's no effect. I think he touched on that as well.
Yeah.
But also promoting, if you've got a reporting mechanism, make sure that people know about it. And then as part of accountability, report, how many cases did we have? How many did we, what kind of cases are this? How did we deal with this? And follow them up to their finalized. Because if we don't, people will never see that indeed there's something that has been done. And if there are cases of that end up in successful prosecution, raise awareness around that. I think it can be a deterrent. But the issue of making sure that there's prevention is quite key. But education still remains. But the first line of defense of the public, including journalists against online harms, is the platforms themselves.
Thank you. My last question, and I think there's been general consensus that an attack on journalists is an attack on the Constitution and our democracy. And those on the other side would argue that, but this is freedom of expression. So as my last question, and also as you give us your closing remarks, I'll start with you, Mr. Majek. How do we balance freedom of expression with the need to prevent digital harms in the online information ecosystem? I'll give you 1 minute, and then Dr. Buluka will end with you. Yeah. Dr. Duke.
No, thanks. I think that's the issue I think that we have been talking about of accountability. Accountability from platform owners is very critical, and then also accountability from users, citizens everywhere. It's very critical because the common denominator is for all of us to respect our democratic rights. So there will always be tensions there and there, but so long as we do things in the spirit of protecting, the rights of everyone, the Constitution, then we are able to win in terms of a lot of things when we implement. But you'll find that even among ourselves as organizations and even social or civil society organizations, sometimes we have our own biases.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm talking in general, we get bored. We get bored. We are in other people's pockets, even in the media, So we do things that benefit someone instead of doing things that will benefit society. So if we can deal with that problem, a lot of regulatory framework, legal frameworks that we have are going to be effective because we are users, but we are also office bearers somewhere, in government, in churches, and everywhere. So we need that moral fiber.
Thank you, Sivalalab. Dr. Buluka, your 1 minute. For me, is an interesting. We had a webinar earlier on balancing freedom of expression and online public protection. What I like about our laws including the Film and Publications Act. Whether you talk takedowns, which is normally a case when someone finds that photos have been put on media or any content that is harmful to them, they don't just say take down. There's a process that is outlined, and that process also finds expression in the Electronic and Transaction Act, Section 77, because there's that process that is outlined to balance that, to make sure that your rights are not circumvented. So I think for me is the mechanisms that you put in place to ensure that your freedom of expression doesn't end up in online abuse of others or harming of others. So I'm happy with the guardrails that our laws provide in terms of balancing that you can't say is abusing or is infringing on my freedom of expression. Meanwhile, you are also abusing others, which means you are violating their rights as well. That balance, I think, in our laws is very solid. And we just have to promote that, and the regulators like AFP must promote that a lot. Thank you. Doc?
I think, it comes to what you've said, that paradox, and that we need to look at it. We can't also over-regulate, because then we take away the freedom of speech, especially when it's legitimate and it's correct. So we need to be careful of that. But I think in closing, one of the most important things is when we look at technology, and we've seen this transition from the 80s to the 90s and now in the 21st century, along with the greatness of technology has also come a lot of complexities and issues. So we are aware of that. But at the same time, we need to make people aware, and maybe we need to flip the narrative sometimes. We've seen that when we continuously put out that this study revealed this, and it's not drumming down on the people who are perpetrating. Maybe we need to change the narrative to them, to bring it back to them. People who are doing this have, there must be something wrong. Why are you doing this? Why do you continue to harass somebody? Why do you harass journalists? What is the reasoning behind it? Because it seems like the more we put the narrative, we actually run the risk of re-victimizing people, unfortunately, at times. And so we flip the narrative and call out and say, let's talk about technology facilitated GBV. But instead of only talking about our results of our study, we now focus on who are these perpetrators. Let's talk about the compounds. Let's talk about how they are infiltrating people's lives. It will force them to understand and also to acknowledge that we are not stupid. We are onto them now. We know and we are aware of what they're doing. And maybe we need that narrative to be pushed alongside. I'm not saying leave the other, which is also very, very important, because victims need their voices to be heard, obviously. But push this narrative of the perpetrators, that people could be sitting in other countries, people could be sitting elsewhere and still perpetrating against women and journalists in South Africa. And again, what the doctor said, that there are mechanisms coming into play, that countries are collaborating and talking to each other. So it forces them to understand that, okay, they're on to me. Because for too long we've let it slide, and they see it as a narrative, oh, you guys are always the victims, we'll continue. Flip the narrative, and we need to start. And it speaks to what was said in the very beginning when we spoke about the results of the study. The time is to act now, but not only act in the sense of making this awareness and the study. Now we've got to challenge ourselves. Who do we work with? What are we going to work towards? And how are we going to bring these people down so that this narrative changes completely? How do we protect our children from it so that they don't also become violators into the future? And those who are guilty of it, how do we hold them accountable? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doc. I think that one of the important things that was raised is we need to start from the roots. And I think in the absence of the MDDA executives, I think I must commit to both OSLab and the FPB that we are more than willing to collaborate and to work with you in visiting the schools to ensure that we preach the word to these young
kids, so that, and even adults, because adults also fall victim. We preach to those who haven't converted to ensure that we have safer online spaces. When you say that we are onto them, you remind me of Mam Kawula in Parliament when she was in the NCOP. She was saying, "Uyez mkhonazi." Yeah, and hopefully we can find ways of doing work on ensuring that we expose these compounds. Thank you very much for your time and joining us. We want to open the floor maybe to a few questions? No? Okay. The police have said no to the questions. Yeah, that's our time. Thank you very much.
Please stay on the stage. I'm going to invite once again our manager for HR and corporate services at the MDDA, Litabo. You stay as well. Yes.
Am I getting a gift?
No. To just again give another token of appreciation to our panel, and then I'm also going to ask Ms. Sanele Zwane to please also come up on stage from the GIZ to also be a part of the handover. Please give her a round of applause as she comes on stage.
And just the disclaimer that these are token of appreciation. It's not envelopes or anything of that kind.
Thank you so much. And then if you can just stand for a picture, please. Ladies and gentlemen, please give them a round of applause. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I promise you we are nearing at the end of our program. I can feel the hunger in the room. Lunch will be served soon. But before we do that, we're just going to go to the second last part of our program, and that's just words of support from some of our partners. I'm going to start off with the NAB. They had shared a message online, and it reads, on behalf of the Community Radio Committee at the National Association of Broadcasters, the NAB, I wish to extend our heartfelt commendation to the Media Development and Diversity Agency for the bold and progressive strides taken to safeguard journalists, especially those from vulnerable and at-risk sub-communities. In a time when we are witnessing a global proliferation of conservative ideologies and shrinking civic spaces and risks faced by women, queer journalists and other marginalized voices have intensified. Online abuse, harassment, and digital threats are not just personal attacks, they are assaults on press freedom and democratic discourse. Your leadership in launching the Statement of Commitment and Call to Action on safeguarding journalists against online harms is both timely and courageous. It reflects a deep understanding of the realities on the ground and a commitment to building inclusive, safe, and resilient media ecosystems. We commend your efforts and reaffirm our support for initiatives that protect the dignity, safety, and the rights of all journalists. Together, we can ensure that community media continues to be a beacon of diversity, truth, and empowerment. Warm regards of Franklin Hazies, who's the chairperson for Community Radio Committee at the National Association of Broadcasters. Please give that message a round of applause. Next up, for their message of support, I'm going to call on BMOA, so that's the Black Media Owners Association. Please also give them a round of applause.
Thank you, Stephen Siakwe here, Executive Director and Board Member at the Black Media Owners Association. We are a fairly new organization, which is a non-profit and non-partisan organization, which is also voluntary, meant to regulate, transform, and inform the community and mainstream needs of black media owners in South Africa. So, as our commitment on behalf of the board, I would just like to state the following. As the BMOA, we are committed to, number one, changing the narrative towards the reporting of our media owners and organizations, making sure that they are gender sensitive and ensure that there's no harm perpetuated towards both the subject and what is written about. Secondly, we want to commit to media literacy and education to all our audiences in terms of online safety, cybersecurity, misinformation, disinformation, and fake news. Also want to commit to have a program within the organization that educates and pushes for the protection of journalists and making sure that online harm is not perpetuated within the media houses. And then fourthly is to hold members accountable and take remedial action towards members involved in online harm and make sure that there are mechanisms in place to report institutions that perpetuate this culture. Also, we would like to actively partner with organizations locally and internationally to combat misinformation, disinformation, and online harm towards not only journalists but also victims as well and users. Lastly, we would like to commit as owners that we will encourage ourselves and people around us to enforce the policies that already exist and make sure that the protection of not only our staff but also the people that we report to and report about is prioritized. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those encouraging words. I think he mentioned in that speech, including, I think, the power of collaboration. So really being able to find partners who are able to share, I think, the vision that we had with the study and essentially trying to build awareness.
Greetings once again. On behalf of the Commission for Gender Equality, we are honored to be here to be part of this narrative and engagement. So we also want to say and express our heartfelt, gratitude to the Media Development and Diversity Agency for this important launch under the theme United Against Online Gender-Based Violence. So this gathering is more than a launch. It is a collective call to action, sealed by the signing of a pledge and statement of commitment to create safe, inclusive, and empowering digital spaces, especially for journalists who continue to use their voices, who continue to risk, who continue to go an extra mile just to inform us and challenge mainstream or what we call challenge society. We are reminded that online gender-based violence is not only a digital concern, it is a human rights violation that targets women, queer persons, and persons with disabilities, threatening their safety, freedom, and participation in democratic life. Too often perpetrators hide behind anonymity of technology. Even today, we don't know how to persecute these perpetrators because there are apps that are facilitating that. Today, me and you are victims, of such violences. Spreading the hate speech, harassment, and sexual corruption without consequence, it is a human defilement. Weak accountability systems further this abuse, and together we must demand transparency, promote ethical digital conduct, and build public confidence to report and challenge online crimes. As the Commission for Gender Equality, we believe that transformation begins with introspection and accountability. We encourage all institutions here in the media, education, public sectors, private sectors to undergo gender audits, to reflect on how they are advancing their equality, diversity, and transformation in their spaces, and also whether you are really glamorizing or perpetuating against the Constitution of South Africa. Being gender sensitive is not an act of compliance, it is an act of conscience. It means recognizing the impact of bias, addressing inequality, and ensuring that no one is left vulnerable because of their gender, sexuality, or disability. Lastly, we salute the journalists in here, researchers, and activists who continue to speak truth to power, often at personal costs. Your courage keeps the light of democracy alive. So, because we've signed this pledge, let it be alive and let it not be offline. Thank you.
Thank you again to the CGE. We now come to the final part of our program. I'm going to invite Ms. Buyiswampini to come to the front to just have the closing remarks from GIZ. Please give her a round of applause.
Thank you, Program Director, and thank you to everyone who is in the room, as well as those who are online, who have participated in this momentous occasion. I think as GIZ, we are quite grateful that we have managed, through the partnership with MDDA, to support a beginning of a journey. I think from the results of the study, we can all attest that the problem is real and that it has negative impact, especially for our journalists, in terms of ensuring that they continue to tell quality stories, as the online harms are meant to gag them and to stop the freedom of expression. So as GIZ, we have walked this journey together with MDDA, but at this point in time, we've also realized that we have just only touched a tip of the iceberg. There is still more to be done, and we would really want to call on the media houses to partner with all the partners that were in the room to strengthen, especially the part of prevention. I think we have heard that there are there are organizations or institutions that are supporting in terms of interventions, but we want to make sure that we prevent the online harms against women journalists and the queer, as well as our journalists who are living with disabilities. As we close today, MDDA, the work has just only started, and we want to challenge you in continuing the journey to make sure that the media houses internally, because I think we've heard also from the lived experiences of the journalists that were in the panel today, that even in-house there are harms that they are also exposed to, not necessarily from the online unrecognized or the people that are hiding behind the digital space, but also what is happening within their employment spaces. And I would also like to thank all the partners that came, and especially from the different government departments that are represented in this space today, and hoping that FPP, CGE, and all the other regulators, you will then continue to hold not only the media houses accountable, but also to call on big tech, because I think that is the missing link here. We know that the online platforms can be regulated. They are able to take down content that they are not happy with. If a content user write something or record something and put it on social media that is against their own rules and regulations, they can take it down. So if they are able to do that, why can't they also be able to do the same when content users are being abusive towards women journalists? Therefore, I want to, when I end today, I would like to call on the regulators in the room and all the partners that are able to call on big tech. We need them to be on the table. We've had TikTok today here, but I think we need more than just TikTok to partner with us in the journey of ensuring that our journalists, they continue to tell the stories and to safeguard our democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you to the GIZ, really again, for making all of this possible. Can we please give them another round of applause? Okay, so this officially brings us to the end of our program, but of course this is not the end of this initiative. So all of this is going to be available online, including a copy of the statement of commitment that will be available for people to be able to download and to sign. So as we might have finished here in the room today and online, but I think now is the next step where we really take actions to make these documents come to life. Thank you, everyone, and thank you also to the crew who are assisting from a technical perspective, the videographers, the caterers, Capital Empire. Thank you for your support today. We have lunch that is going to be served outside. Please make sure that you take this time to also network while you grab a bite. Thank you to everyone who also joined us online. We're now going to close that session as well. Thank you and have a lovely week ahead.